in the shadow of Babylon's towering ziggurats, where the Euphrates flows and the Code of Hammurabi reigns, a slave's quiet defiance sparks a story of resilience. From temple altars to brutal kilns, their whispered tales and hidden acts challenge a system built on their suffering. Will their humanity triumph, or will the chains of an ancient empire bind them forever? Story 1. The Chains of Debt. How free Babylonians became slaves. Imagine yourself in the bustling streets of ancient Babylon, around 1750 BCE, under the reign of King Hammurabi. The sun beats down on the mud brick houses lining the Euphrates River, where merchants haggle over barley and wool, and scribes etch records onto clay tablets. You are a free citizen, perhaps a farmer or a craftsman, navigating the rhythms of daily life in one of the world's earliest urban centers. But beneath this veneer of order lies a precarious existence, where a single misfortune, failed harvest, a burdensome loan, or an unexpected debt could strip away your freedom and plunge you into the world of slavery. This was the reality for many Babylonians, where debt bondage formed one of the most insidious paths into enslavement, turning neighbors and kin into property overnight in Babylonian society. Slavery was not always the result of distant wars or foreign conquests, though those certainly contributed. Far more commonly, it ensnared the local populace through economic hardship. You might start your day tilling fields outside the city walls, relying on the annual floods of the Tigris and Euphrates to irrigate your crops. But if the waters came too high or too low, as they often did in this unpredictable landscape, your yield could dwindle to nothing. Faced with starvation, you would turn to a wealthier landowner or a temple priest for a loan of silver or grain. These loans came with steep interest rates, often 22–33% annually, as recorded in surviving contracts etched in cuneiform. If you couldn't repay, the creditor had the legal right to seize your labor, or that of your family, as collateral. The Code of Hammurabi, that monumental stele of black diorite inscribed with 282 laws, formalized this system with a detached precision that masked its human cost. Law 117, for instance, allowed a debtor to hand over his wife, son, or daughter into servitude for up to 3 years to work off the debt. After that period, they were to be released, but extensions or permanent enslavement could occur if the debt lingered. You can picture the scene: a family gathered in a dimly lit home, the father calculating on a clay abacus while the creditor's representative waits at the door. The air thick with the scent of date palms and baking bread, yet heavy with dread. Children, oblivious at first, might play with reed toys on the floor, unaware that their futures hung in the balance. This debt slavery was woven into the fabric of Babylonian economy, where agriculture dominated and trade flourished along river routes. Temples, acting as vast economic institutions, often served as lenders, their granaries bulging with surplus from tithes. A scribe's tablet from the period might detail a loan of 1 mina of silver to a farmer named Sinadin, repayable at harvest with interest in barley. If unpaid Sinadim could become an ardu, the Babylonian term for a male slave, marked perhaps by a distinctive haircut or a clay tag around his neck bearing his owner's name. Women and children fared similarly, often assigned to domestic tasks like grinding flour or weaving textiles in the creditor's household. Life as a debt slave began with the loss of autonomy. You would be relocated, sometimes within the same city, to serve in menial roles that free citizens avoided. Mornings might involve rising before dawn to draw water from canals, your hands calloused from hauling heavy jars. Afternoons could mean laboring in workshops, shaping bricks from river mud, or tending to livestock in stifling heat. The diet was basic barley, porridge, onions, and fish from the river, rationed to sustain work but not comfort. Socially, you were demoted. Slaves were considered part of the household's property, akin to tools or animals, though some laws offered minimal protections, like prohibiting excessive cruelty that led to death without consequence. Yet, the awful irony lay in its familiarity. Unlike war captives from distant Elam or Assyria, debt slaves were often former equals friends, relatives, or community members. This bred a quiet resentment as you toiled alongside those who once shared your status. Historical records from Sipper and Nipper reveal cases where entire families entered bondage due to famine or royal taxes, their pleas inscribed in desperate letters to officials. But what if the debt proved insurmountable, chaining generations to servitude? You find yourself now not as a free citizen, but as one newly bound, your freedom traded to settle an unpayable debt in ancient Babylon. Around 1750 BCE, the transition is stark, yet the city around you hums with the same relentless energy. Merchants shouting in the marketplace, priests chanting in towering ziggurats, and the Euphrates flowing steadily past. Your days, once shaped by the rhythms of your own choices, are now dictated by the household or estate of your creditor. As a debt slave, your life is a study in monotony and survival, governed by the unspoken rules of Babylonian society and the looming presence of Hammurabi's code. But what did this servitude truly entail? And how did it reshape the lives of those in your new reality? Begins with a physical marker of your status. A clay tablet inscribed with cuneiform might record your name and debt, while some masters shaved a distinctive pattern into your hair or issued a small tag to wear, signaling your bondage to passersby. You're assigned to one of the many roles that kept Babylon's economy churning. If you're in a wealthy household, you might spend hours grinding barley into flour on a stone quern, your shoulders aching from the repetitive motion. The work is relentless. Daily quotas demand producing enough to feed the household, with surplus sold at market. If assigned to agricultural labor, you'd toil in the fields, repairing irrigation canals under the scorching Mesopotamian sun, or harvesting dates from towering palms. Your feet sinking into the muddy soil. The Code of Hammurabi offers a glimpse into the legal framework governing your existence. Law 118, for instance, notes that if a debt slave's service exceeds 3 years, they might be sold permanently to another master, severing ties with their past life. This legal precision underscores the transactional nature of your plight. You're no longer a farmer or artisan, but an asset valued alongside livestock or tools. Surviving records from the city of your reveal contracts detailing such sales, where a man named Aonosar sold a debtor named Shuadad for 15 shekels of silver to work in a textile workshop. The price of a slave, very typically 10 to 30 shekels, depending on skills or age, but it was a sum few could repay once entrapped. Daily life is defined by routine. You rise before dawn, eating a simple meal of barley bread and diluted beer, perhaps flavored with dill or coriander, as recorded in household ledgers. Your tasks are unending. Women often weave wool or flax into cloth, their fingers deftly working looms for hours, while men might carry bricks to construct new granaries or temples. The labor is grueling, but moments of human connection persist. You might overhear gossip among other slaves about a festival for the goddess Ishtar, or share a rare laugh over a clumsy overseer. Yet, these moments are fleeting, overshadowed by the knowledge that your labor benefits another socially. You're an outcast within your own city. Free Babylonians, even those you once knew, avert their eyes when passing you in the street, your shaved head a visible reminder of your fall. The temples, which own vast estates and many slaves, are particularly rigid. If you serve in one, you might clean sacred altars or carry offerings, but you're barred from participating in the rituals that define Babylonian spiritual life. The psychological toll is heavy cuneiform tablets from Nippur describe slaves petitioning for release, their pleas often ignored unless a relative could pay the debt. Physical conditions vary. Some masters provide adequate shelter in mud brick quarters, but others house slaves in cramped reed mat sheds. Injuries from overwork, strained backs, blistered hands are common, with little access to the physicians who serve free citizens. The code offers some protections, like fining a master who blinds a slave through cruelty, but enforcement is inconsistent. You learn to endure, to measure your worth in survival. But as months turn to years, a question lingers. Could you ever reclaim your freedom? Or would this life define your future? You've endured years as a debt slave in ancient Babylon, your days blending into a haze of labor under the unrelenting sun, or within the confines of a creditor's household. It's still 1750 BCE, and the city pulses with life artisans crafting jewelry, scribes recording trade deals, and priests offering prayers to Marduk. But for you, the world has narrowed to the tasks assigned by your master. Whether it's hauling water from the Euphrates or weaving cloth for market, the promise of freedom, once a faint hope, feels distant. Yet the Code of Hammurabi and Babylonian customs offer rare pathways to escape bondage. As your servitude stretches on, the question that haunts you is whether release is possible and what it would mean for your future and Babylon's broader society. The Code of Hammurabi, etched into its towering stele, provides a sliver of hope. Law 117 stipulates that debt slaves, whether you, your wife, or your children, should serve no more than 3 years before release, assuming the original debt is deemed repaid. But reality is harsher. Cuneiform records from Sippar show that creditors often manipulated terms, extending servitude through additional loans or inflated interest. If you're lucky, a relative might scrape together enough silver or barley to settle your debt, as seen in a tablet describing a man named Belshunu redeeming his brother for 20 shekels. Yet, for many, this is a fantasy. Families are often too poor or similarly enslaved. Another route is manumission, where a master voluntarily frees a slave, perhaps for loyal service. Such cases are rare, but documented, like a woman named Amat Marduk, freed to serve as a temple dedicatee after years of grinding grain. Your daily struggle continues, but small acts of resilience emerge. You learn to barter extra rations with other slaves or quietly share stories of life before bondage, fostering a fragile sense of community. Some dare to flee, though runaways face brutal consequences. Law 15 prescribes death for harboring escapee. A tablet from Nippur recounts a slave named Iliadanum who fled to a neighboring city, only to be recaptured and branded. Still, these stories fuel whispered dreams of freedom, even if the risks are steep. For those who remain, survival means adapting, learning the rhythms of your master's household, anticipating their needs, or mastering a craft like pottery to gain favor. The climax of your story hinges on chance or intervention. Perhaps a bountiful harvest allows your family to pay your debt, or a royal edict, like those occasionally issued by kings such as Amisaduqa, cancels certain debts to restore social balance. These edicts, inscribed on clay, aimed to prevent societal collapse from widespread enslavement, reflecting Babylon's awareness of debt's destabilizing power. If freed, you return to a changed world, your status restored, but your reputation scarred. You might resume farming, but neighbors now view you with suspicion, and your family may have fractured under the strain of separation. The legacy of debt slavery in Babylon ripples through history. It shaped a society where economic vulnerability was a constant threat, embedding a fear of debt that persisted in later cultures. The code's blend of mercy and severity influenced legal systems across the Near East, from Assyria to the Hebrew Bible's laws on servitude. Reflecting on this, you might wonder how modern systems of credit and obligation echo Babylon's chains, less visible but no less binding. Debt slavery's lesson is clear. Freedom is fragile when survival depends on borrowed means. How might such a system, so rooted in daily survival, have shaped the values of those who lived it? Story to daily drudgery. A slave's life in the fields and households. Picture yourself in ancient Babylon, around 1750 BCE. Waking before dawn to the distant crow of roosters and the gentle lapping of the Euphrates River. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and date palms. But you are no free farmer or merchant. You are a slave, bound to a wealthy household or sprawling estate. Your days defined by endless tasks that keep Babylon's bustling society afloat. Whether you were captured in war, born into servitude, or sold to settle a debt, your life is a testament to resilience amid monotony. The daily grind of a slave in Babylon was not marked by grand battles or heroic tales, but by the quiet, grueling labor that sustained the city's economy and households. What was it like to live this life? And how did it shape the people trapped within it? As a slave, your role depends on your master's status. In a wealthy household, you might be one of many, each assigned specific duties. Women often worked indoors, grinding barley into flour on heavy stone querns, their hands roughened by hours of repetitive motion. A single woman could grind enough in a day to feed a small household, producing coarse bread that was a staple for both free and enslaved. Men might work as porters, hauling goods from riverboats to storage rooms, their backs strained under sacks of grain or wool. If you serve a rural landowner, your days are spent in the fields, digging irrigation canals to channel the unpredictable waters of the Tigris and Euphrates. These canals, vital to Babylon's agriculture, require constant maintenance, and you wield a hoe under the scorching sun, sweat mixing with the mud caked on your feet. Your living conditions reflect your low status. You sleep on reed mats in a corner of the master's house or in a cramped outbuilding, with little protection from the cold nights or stifling summer heat. Food is basic: barley, porridge, onions, and fish from the river, rationed carefully to keep you working. Cuneiform tablets from the city of Larsa detail slave rations, about 1 liter of barley per day for an adult, supplemented with dates or diluted beer. Clothing is minimal, often a simple wool or linen tunic, patched and worn thin. You're marked as a slave, perhaps by a shaved head or a clay tag bearing your master's name, a constant reminder of your place in Babylon's rigid hierarchy. The Code of Hammurabi governs your existence with cold precision. Law 199, for example, finds a master who blinds a slave, but such protections are rarely enforced. You work from sunrise to sunset, with brief breaks to eat or rest in the shade. Socially, you're isolated. Free Babylonians avoid you, and even temple priests, who oversee many slaves, treat you as an extension of their property. Yet, small moments of humanity persist. You might share a quiet joke with another slave while stacking clay bricks, or overhear market gossip about a royal procession. These fleeting connections are lifelines, but they don't erase the exhaustion or the fear of punishment for failing to meet quotas. The scale of your labor is staggering. A single estate might rely on dozens of slaves to produce surplus grain for trade, fueling Babylon's role as a commercial hub. Archaeological records from Uruk show households employing slaves to weave textiles exported as far as Elam. Your work, though menial, is the backbone of this prosperity. But as you collapse onto your mat at night, muscles aching, what hope sustains you in a life of unending toil? The sun has barely risen over Babylon, yet you're already at work, your body accustomed to the relentless rhythm of servitude in 1750 BCE as a slave. Your life is a cycle of repetitive tasks, each day blurring into the next. Yet the weight of your labor carries the city's prosperity on your shoulders. Whether you're kneading dough in a dim household kitchen or repairing a canal bank under the watchful eye of an overseer, your existence is defined by the needs of your master. The Code of Hammurabi looms over you, offering minimal protections while reinforcing your status as property. But within this grind, there are subtle strategies for survival, moments of quiet resistance, and glimpses of the human spirit that endure. How did slaves navigate this oppressive world, and what kept them going? Your tasks vary by season and master. In spring, you might plant barley or sesame, your hands guiding a wooden plow through fertile soil. Summer brings the harvest, where you swing a sickle alongside others, the air heavy with dust and the hum of cicadas. In households, women slaves often dominate domestic work, spinning wool into thread, brewing beer, or tending to children of the free. A cuneiform tablet from Nippur lists a slave named Inannabelet, tasked with weaving 10 cubits of cloth daily, her quota enforced by a tally keeper. Failure to meet such demands risks punishment, perhaps a lashing or reduced rations. as overseers maintain strict control. Law 146 of Hammurabi's Code notes that a slave who disobeys could be demoted further, though what's lower than your current state is hard to imagine. Survival demands ingenuity. You learn to work efficiently, conserving energy for the longest tasks. Some slaves barter skillsanak for brewing or repairing tools for extra food or favor. You might trade a woven basket for a handful of dates with another slave, creating informal networks of support. These acts are small rebellions against the system, though overt resistance is rare. A tablet from Sippar records a slave named Rimson who sabotaged a loom to delay his quota, only to face branding as punishment. Still, these stories circulate, fueling whispered hopes of agency. Your health is a constant concern. The physical toll of labor blisters, joint pain, or infections from canal water is rarely treated. Medical texts from the period focus on free citizens, leaving slaves to rely on folk remedies like herbs or river mud poultices. Sleep is scarce, interrupted by early mornings or nighttime tasks like guarding livestock. Emotionally, the isolation stings. You're barred from festivals like the Akitu, where free Babylonians celebrate the new year, reinforcing your outsider status. Yet, you find solace in shared glances or songs hummed during work. Fragments of culture from your life before enslavement. The broader impact of your labor is undeniable. Babylonian agriculture and trade thrive because of slaves like you, who produce the grain, textiles, and bricks that fill markets and temples. A single household might generate enough surplus to trade with merchants from Dilmun or Mari, linking your toil to distant lands. But this contribution comes at a cost. Sure, body and spirit are worn down, your identity reduced to a line on a clay tablet. As you trudge through another day, a question gnaws at you. Could there be a way to endure this life while preserving some shred of self? Years have passed in your life as a slave in Babylon around 1750 BCE, and the weight of daily drudgery has etched itself into your body and mind. The city thrives, its ziggurats gleam, its markets buzz with traders from distant lands, and its canals brim with life-giving water. Yet your world remains confined to the repetitive tasks of field or household. Your existence, a cog in Babylon's vast machine. The Code of Hammurabi offers faint promises of protection or release, but the reality of your servitude is unyielding. As you navigate this life, the possibility of change through endurance, redemption, or rare moments of upheaval looms as both a dream and a challenge. What would it take to break free? And how did this system shape Babylon's legacy? For many slaves, endurance is the only path. You adapt, learning to anticipate your overseer's moods or mastering tasks like brickmaking to avoid punishment. Some find purpose in small victories, perfecting a batch of beer or teaching a younger slave to weave. Cuneiform records from your reveal a slave named Sholgili, praised for his skill in irrigation maintenance, earning him slightly better rations. Such favor is rare, but it offers a glimmer of agency. Others seek escape, though the risks are dire. Law 16 of Hammurabi's Code punishes those who aid runaways with death, and recaptured slaves face branding or worse. A tablet from Larsa tells of a slave named Ninurta who fled to a marshland, only to be betrayed by a fisherman and returned to his master. Redemption, though elusive, is possible. Debt slaves, unlike those born or captured in war, might be freed after 3 years, per Law 117, if their debt is cleared. A family member or a rare royal edict could secure your release. King Amisadwa's edict of 1646 BCE, inscribed on clay, canceled debts to prevent societal collapse, freeing some slaves. If freed, you face a new struggle, integrating into a society that marks you as tainted. You might return to farming, but your neighbor's whispers linger, and your skills may have atrophied. For those born into slavery or war captives, freedom is rarer, often requiring a master's goodwill or adoption into a free family, as seen in cases from Nippur, where skilled slaves were manumitted to serve temples. The climax of your story might be quieter. Relative pays your debt, or you're freed to work as a semi-independent laborer. But the toll of slavery endures. Your body bears scars from labor. Your spirit carries the weight of lost years. Babylonian slavery, driven by economic necessity, fueled the city's wealth but sowed seeds of instability. Widespread debt bondage prompted periodic royal reforms, reflecting the system's unsustainability. This cycle of enslavement and release influenced later societies, from Assyrian laws to biblical mandates like the Jubilee year, which echoed Babylonian debt forgiveness. Reflecting on this, you see how slavery's grind shaped not just individuals, but entire civilizations. The labor of slaves like you built Babylon's grandeur, yet your story is rarely told. Today, modern systems of exploitation, though less overt, mirror this dynamic, where economic pressures bind people to relentless work. The lesson is stark. Societies thrive on the backs of the unseen, but at what cost to humanity? How did Babylon's reliance on such labor shape its rise and eventual fall? Story 3. Under the Code. Laws that bound the enslaved stand in the shadow of a towering black diorite, steely in Babylon's central plaza. Around 1750 BCE, where the Code of Hammurabi looms as both a symbol of order and a reminder of your bondage. The air is heavy with the scent of baked clay and incense from nearby temples, and the city hums with scribes, merchants, and priests. You are a slave, perhaps once a free farmer or artisan, now bound by debt or conquest, your life governed by the 282 laws etched into that stone. These laws, proclaimed by King Hammurabi to unify his empire, dictate every aspect of your existence, your work, your punishment, even your faint hope of freedom. The code is a paradox. It offers slaves some protections while reinforcing their status as property. What did it mean to live under this rigid legal framework, and how did it shape the daily reality of the enslaved? The Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest written legal systems, is precise yet detached. Addressing slaves, you might labor in a household, grinding barley or weaving wool, or in the fields, maintaining the irrigation canals that feed Babylon's fertile lands. Law 199, for instance, mandates compensation if a master blinds or injures you severely, suggesting a value to your life, but only as an asset. A cuneiform tablet from Sippar records a case where a master paid 20 shekels for breaking a slave's arm, a rare instance of enforcement. More often, such laws are ignored, as your worth is tied to your labor, not your humanity. Your daily life is shaped by the code's structure. If you're a debt slave, Law 117 promises release after 3 years of service, provided the debt is cleared. This applies to you or your family. Perhaps your wife or child was given as collateral for a loan of silver or grain. But creditors, often wealthy landowners or temple officials, exploit loopholes, extending debts with high interest rates, as seen in contracts from Nippur. War captives, or those born into slavery, face bleaker prospects with no automatic release. You might wear a clay tag or have a shaved head, marking you as property, and the code ensures your master's rights over you. Law 146, for example, allows a master to demote a disobedient slave to harsher tasks, like brickmaking in the scorching sun. The legal system permeates even small interactions. If you steal a loaf of bread to ease your hunger, Law 7 prescribes severe punishment, potentially death or mutilation unless your master intervenes. Socially, you're an outcast. Free Babylonians avoid you in the market, their eyes fixed on the ground. Yet, the code's reach extends beyond punishment. It regulates your rations, about 1 liter of barley daily, per records from larcened your work quotas, ensuring you produce enough to sustain your master's household or estate. Temples, major slaveholders, rely on you to clean altars or carry offerings, though you're barred from sacred rituals despite its rigidity. The code reflects Babylon's complex society, where slaves are vital to the economy. Your labor supports the city's trade in grain and textiles, linking it to distant regions like Dilmun. But as you toil, the steely shadow feels oppressive, a reminder that justice is not for you. Could the code's promises of release or protection ever materialize? Or are they mere illusions in a system built on your subjugation? You're still in Babylon, 1750 BCE, laboring under the weight of the Code of Hammurabi, its laws dictating your every move as a slave. The city thrives around U-boats, glide along the Euphrates, laden with barley and wool, while scribes etch contracts in bustling markets. But for you, whether kneading dough in a household or hauling mud bricks for a temple, the code is both a shield and a chain. It promises limited protections, like fines for excessive cruelty, yet enforces your servitude with unyielding rules. Your life is a balance of compliance and quiet resilience, navigating a legal system that values you as property while hinting at the possibility of freedom. How did slaves endure under this code, and what strategies did they use to survive its constraints? The code's laws touch every facet of your existence. If you're a debt slave, Law 117's 3-year limit on servitude is a faint hope, but creditors often manipulate debts to keep you bound. A tablet from Uruk details a debtor named Sinadam, whose servitude was extended when his master added new interest to an unpaid loan. For war captives, or those born into slavery, the code offers no such timeline. Your bondage is indefinite unless your master grants manumission. Law 175 ensures that children of a slave and a free person remain enslaved if the master claims them, trapping generations. You might be tasked with grinding grain or tending livestock, your quotas set by the code's expectation of productivity, as seen in records from Nippur where slaves were required to produce 10 liters of flour daily. Punishments under the code are swift and severe. Law 15 threatens death for anyone aiding your escape, making flight a desperate gamble. A cuneiform document from Larsa describes a slave named Ireshali, caught fleeing to a neighboring city, who was branded and reassigned to harsher canal-digging duties. Yet, the code also limits abuse. Law 196 demands an eye for an eye if a master blinds a free man. But for a slave, it's only a fine. This disparity underscores your status, human, yet less than. You learn to avoid trouble, keeping your head down while stacking bricks or weaving textiles, knowing that defiance could cost you dearly. Survival requires cunning. You might curry favor by excelling at a task, like brewing beer that earns your master praise. Some slaves, as recorded in Sippar, traded small services like mending a fellow slave's tunic for extra rations. These acts build fragile networks among the enslaved, a whisper of community in a world that isolates you. Socially, you're shunned. Free citizens pass you in the street, their glances avoiding your marked head or tattered tunic. Even in temples, where you might sweep courtyards, you're excluded from the rituals that define Babylonian life. Like the Akitu festival, your labor fuels Babylon's economy. Woven cloth or harvested grain reaches markets as far as Elam, but the code's legal precision offers little comfort. It regulates your rations, barley and fish, and rest minimal, ensuring you're just healthy enough to work. As you toil, you hear of rare cases where slaves were freed, perhaps a master's gratitude or a royal edict. These stories spark hope, but the code's shadow looms large. Could you ever navigate its rules to find freedom, or does it bind you too tightly to escape? In Babylon, 1750 BCE, you've lived years under the Code of Hammurabi. Its laws both a cage and a faint promise of justice for you as a slave. The city's grandurates, ziggurats, bustling markets, and fertile fields relies on your labor, yet you remain a shadow in its legal framework. Whether you're a debt slave hoping for release or a war captive bound indefinitely, the code shapes your fate with cold efficiency. As you grind grain or repair canals, you cling to stories of freedom, rare but real, while enduring the code's punishments and protections. The climax of your story hinges on whether this legal system offers a path to liberation or entrenches your bondage forever. How did the code's legacy shape the lives of slaves and the society that bound them? For debt slaves, the code's Law 117 is a lifeline, promising release after 3 years if the debt is settled. But tablets from Sippar reveal how rarely this happens. Creditors extend terms, and families often lack the means to pay. A record describes a slave named Belatili, freed when her brother paid 25 shekels, but such cases are outliers. War captives and those born into slavery face grimmer odds, reliant on manumission, master's whim, or reward for exceptional service. A cuneiform text from Nippur tells of a slave named Marduk Nasser, freed to serve as a temple scribe after years of loyalty. These rare victories fuel hope, but most endure without such luck. The code's punishments are a constant threat. Law 17 imposes harsh penalties for aiding runaways, deterring escape. A tablet from your recounts a slave, Shamashili, who fled to a marsh but was recaptured and chained to heavier labor. Yet small acts of resistance persisting might work slower or share rations, building solidarity. The code's protections, like Law 199's fines for injury, are seldom enforced, leaving you vulnerable. Your life is regulated down to your diet, barley, and date sand your tasks. From weaving to brickmaking, all supporting Babylon's trade networks to Mari and beyond. Freedom, if it comes, is bittersweet. A royal edict, like Ammasadwa's in 1646 BCE, might cancel debts, freeing some slaves to prevent economic collapse. If you're released, you return to a society that shuns you, your status tainted. You might farm again, but the stigma lingers, and your health is worn from years of toil. The code's structure, balancing control with occasional mercy, reflects Babylon's need for stability. It ensured a steady labor supply while preventing rebellion through rare debt relief. The code's legacy stretches far beyond Babylon. Its blend of rigidity and reform influenced later legal systems. From Assyrian codes to biblical laws like the Jubilee, which mandated periodic slave releases. Your story, though buried in clay tablets, reveals the human cost of Babylon's prosperity. The code bound millions, yet its loopholes and edicts show a society grappling with the unsustainability of mass enslavement. Today, modern labor systems echo these dynamics, less overt, but still tying people to economic necessity. The lesson is clear. Laws shape societies, but they also expose their fragility. How did the code's balance of justice and oppression reflect the values of a civilization built on the backs of the enslaved? Story for punishments and reprisals. The harsh hand of justice on slaves here in ancient Babylon. Around 1750 BCE, a slave toiling under the unrelenting Mesopotamian sun or within the dim walls of a master's household. The city thrives, markets buzz with traders. Its canals nourish fertile fields, and the towering stele of Hammurabi's code stands as a testament to order. But for you, that order means fear. As the code's laws mete out harsh punishments for slaves who stray from their prescribed roles. Whether you were enslaved through debt, war, or birth, the threat of reprisal shapes your every action. A single misstep, spilling grain, speaking out of turn, or attempting escape could bring swift and brutal consequences. The code's justice, while structured, is unforgiving, designed to maintain control over the enslaved who fuel Babylon's prosperity. What did it mean to live under this constant threat, and how did it define the lives of those in bondage? The Code of Hammurabi, inscribed in cuneiform on black diorite, is explicit about slave punishments. Law 15, for instance, declares that anyone aiding a runaway slave faces death, making escape a perilous dream. If you're caught fleeing, Law 17 allows your master to brand or mutilate you, marking your body as a warning to others. A tablet from Larsa records a slave named Enlabani, recaptured after fleeing to a marsh, who was chained to a millstone for months as punishment. Such reprisals are public, meant to deter others. You might labor in a field, clearing silt from irrigation canals, your hands blistered from wielding a hoe, knowing that failing to meet your quota could lead to a lashing, as outlined in Law 146, which permits masters to discipline disobedient slaves. punishments extend beyond physical pain. If you steal a loaf of bread from the household stores to ease your hunger, Law 7 threatens severe penalties, potentially death or the loss of a hand, unless your master shows mercy. Cuneiform records from Sipper detail a slave named Ishtarumi who lost 2 fingers for taking wool from a loom. The code's logic is clear. You are property, and any act against your master's interests is a crime against the social order. Even minor infractions, like speaking disrespectfully, could lead to being reassigned to grueling tasks, such as brickmaking in the scorching heat. Where clay dust clogs your lungs, your daily life is a careful dance to avoid these reprisals. You rise before dawn, eating a sparse meal of barley, porridge, and fish, rationed to keep you working, as noted in household ledgers from you might weave textiles or carry water. Always under an overseer's watchful eye, the fear of punishment isolates you. Free Babylonians shun you, and even fellow slaves might betray you to gain favor. Temples, major slaveholders, are particularly harsh. A tablet from Nippur describes a slave punished for spilling a sacred offering, forced to clean altars for weeks without rest. Yet, the system's cruelty fuels Babylon's economy. Your labor produces the grain and cloth traded as far as Dilmun, but the code ensures your submission through fear. As you toil, the threat of the next punishment looms, a constant reminder of your place. Could there be ways to navigate this harsh justice, or was resistance doomed to invite even greater suffering? The threat of punishment hangs over you like a storm cloud in Babylon. 1750 BCE, as you labor as a slave in a bustling city of mud brick houses and vibrant markets, the Code of Hammurabi, with its 282 laws, is both your oppressor and a faint shield, prescribing brutal reprisals for defiance while offering rare protections. Whether you're grinding barley in a household or hauling reeds for temple construction, every task is shadowed by the fear of a whip, branding iron, or worse. The code ensures your master's control, but within its rigid framework, you seek ways to endure, perhaps even resist, in small, quiet ways. How did slaves cope with this relentless justice? And what did it cost them to survive under such a system? Punishments are not just physical, but psychological, designed to break your spirit. Law 2:5, for example, allows a master to cut off a slave's ear for striking a free person, a public humiliation that marks you as less than human. A tablet from Uruk records a slave named Ninotopol, punished with facial scarring for arguing with an overseer. His disfigurement, a lifelong badge of shame. The code's penalties are calculated to deter. Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways ensures that even sympathetic free citizens hesitate to help. Escape attempts, though rare, are met with swift retribution. A cuneiform document from Nippur describes a slave named Shamashbel, who fled to a neighboring village, but was betrayed and forced to wear heavy shackles while digging canals to survive. You learn to navigate the code's edges. You work diligently, perhaps excelling at weaving or brewing to avoid notice. Some slaves, as seen in records from Sipper, gain favor by performing extra tasks, like repairing a master's cart, earning a scrap of bread, or a moment's rest. You might share whispered strategies with others how to hide a small stash of barley or feign illness to avoid the harshest labor. These acts of quiet defiance are risky. Law 146 allows masters to reassign disobedient slaves to back-breaking tasks like quarrying clay, where injuries are common. A tablet from Larsa notes a slave reassigned to brick kilns after spilling a jar of oil. His hands burned by the ovens. The psychological toll is immense. You're isolated, barred from festivals like the Akitu, where free Babylonians celebrate renewal. Your rations, barley, onions, and diluted beer are barely enough, and hunger gnaws at you, tempting theft that could cost you dearly. The code's protections, like Law 199's fines for severe injury, are rarely enforced, leaving you vulnerable to an overseer's temper. Temples, which own many slaves, are particularly strict. A record from Yor describes a slave flogged for dropping a sacred vessel, yet you find fleeting solace in shared glances or hummed songs. Fragments of a life before bondage, your labor sustains. Babylon's wealthier textiles and grain feed trade routes to Elam, but the code's punishments ensure your submission. As you toil, you hear tales of rare leniency, a master sparing a slave for loyalty, or a royal edict freeing some. These stories spark a flicker of hope, but the reality of your chains remains. Could you find a way to endure or resist without inviting the code's full wrath? Or is survival itself your only rebellion? You've lived years under the Code of Hammurabi's harsh justice in Babylon, 1750 BCE, where every misstep as a slave invites punishment, lashings, branding, or worse. The city's prosperities, ziggurats, markets, and canals rests on your labor. Yet the code's laws keep you in fear, ensuring your submission. Whether you're a debt slave, war captive, or born into bondage, you've learned to navigate this brutal system, balancing compliance with quiet acts of defiance. The climax of your story lies in whether this relentless cycle of punishment can be broken and what it means for your future. How did the code's harsh reprisals shape the lives of slaves, and what lasting impact did they leave on Babylon's society? Escape remains a dangerous dream. Law 16's severe penalties deter aid, and recaptured runaways face grim fates. A tablet from Yor tells of a slave named Inanazu, who fled to a riverbank but was caught and chained to a grinding stone for a year. Yet, some slaves find subtle ways to resist. You might slow your work on a canal, claiming fatigue, or share extra rations with a weaker companion, as seen in records from Nippur, where slaves bartered skills for survival. These acts, though small, defy the code's grip, preserving a spark of humanity. Punishment, however, is ever-present. Law 25's mutilations, or Law 146's reassignment to grueling tasks like kill work, ensure compliance. Relief, when it comes, is rare. For debt slaves, Law 117 promises release after 3 years, but creditors often extend debts, as seen in a Sipper tablet, where a slave's term was prolonged by added interest. Manumission is another faint hope. A master might free a loyal slave, like one named Mardukili in Uruk, freed for crafting exceptional pottery. Royal edicts, like Amisadwa's in 1646 BCE, occasionally canceled debts, freeing some to prevent economic collapse. If freed, you face a new challenge: reintegration. Society marks you as tainted, your body scarred from labor or punishment. you might return to farming. But neighbors' whispers and weakened health linger. The code's punishments maintained Babylon's order, but sowed seeds of instability. Widespread fear suppressed rebellion, yet the need for periodic debt relief, as in Amisadwa's edict, shows the system's fragility. Your labor built Babylon's wealth, grain and textiles traded to Maribut. The human cost was immense. The code's legacy influenced later legal systems, from Assyrian laws to biblical codes, which adopted similar balances of punishment and mercy. Your story, etched in clay tablets, reveals a society dependent on oppression, yet aware of its limits. Reflecting on this, you see how fear shaped not just slaves, but Babylon itself. The code's harsh justice ensured productivity, but alienated the enslaved, whose quiet resilience hinted at the system's cracks. Today, modern parallels exploitative labor or punitive systems echo this dynamic where control comes at a cost. The lesson is stark. Societies built on harsh justice risk their own stability, as fear can only hold so long. How did Babylon's reliance on such punishments reflect its values? And what does it tell us about the price of order? Story 5: Family Fractures, Slavery's Impact on Kinship and Maria Jaor in Ancient Babylon. Around 1750 BCE, standing in the dusty courtyard of a mud brick house, the Euphrates River glimmering nearby, the city pulses with life. Merchants barter in the market, priests chant in towering ziggurats, and scribes etch records on clay tablets. But you are a slave, perhaps once a free farmer or weaver, now bound by debt or conquest. Your family, once your anchor, is fractured by the harsh realities of enslavement. The Code of Hammurabi, towering in the city's plaza, governs not just your labor, but the bonds of kinship and marriage, tearing apart families or binding them in new, painful ways. Slavery in Babylon didn't just rob you of freedom. It reshaped the very ties that defined your life. How did this system disrupt families, and what did it mean to love or lose under its weight? The code's laws are precise and unforgiving when it comes to slaves and their families. If you're a debt slave, Law 117 allows your wife or children to be taken as collateral for a loan, serving up to 3 years to clear it. A tablet from Sippar records a farmer named Belshunu, whose wife and son were enslaved when he defaulted on a barley loan. You might be separated from your spouse, sent to different households, one grinding grain, another digging canals. War captives and those born into slavery face even harsher realities. Their families are often split at the whim of masters or sold separately in markets. A cuneiform contract from Yor describes a mother named Lemi sold to a temple while her daughter was sent to a distant estate. Marriage, a cornerstone of Babylonian life, is deeply affected. Free citizens could marry slaves, but the code complicates these unions. Law 175 states that children of a free person and a slave remain enslaved if the master claims them, binding your offspring to your fate. You might love another slave in your household, sharing quiet moments while weaving or hauling water, but any marriage requires the master's approval. A tablet from Nippur tells of 2 slaves, Shamashili and Ishtarbelet, permitted to wed but forced to live apart, their children claimed by the master. Your family life, if allowed, is fragile. subject to the code's rules, and your owners will. Daily life as a slave strains these bonds further. You work from dawn to dusk, perhaps, spinning wool or tending livestock, leaving little time for family. Rations of barley and fish, as recorded in Larsa ledgers, barely sustain you, let alone allow you to provide for kin. If your family is enslaved together, you might see them in passing, sharing a glance while carrying bricks. But separation is common. Temples and wealthy households often house slaves in cramped quarters, far from loved ones. Socially, your isolated free Babylonians shun you, and your marked head or tattered tunic signals your status. Your labor fuels Babylon's wealth, producing grain and textiles for trade with Elam, but your family pays the price. The code's legal framework, meant to maintain order, often destroys the familial bonds that give life meaning. As you toil, you wonder, could you ever reunite with your loved ones? Or would slavery's grip forever redefine your family? The sun rises over Babylon, 1750 BCE, and you, a slave, begin another day of grueling labor, perhaps weaving textiles in a dim household or harvesting dates under the scorching sun. The Code of Hammurabi, with its cold precision, not only chains you to your tasks, but also fractures the family ties that once gave you strength. Your spouse or children, if not sold or separated, might toil nearby, but the system ensures that your bonds are strained or severed. Whether you're a debt slave hoping for release or a war captive bound indefinitely, slavery reshapes kinship and marriage, leaving you to navigate love and loss in a world that sees you as property. How did slaves maintain these fragile connections? And what strategies did they use to preserve a sense of family? The code's laws deepen the pain of separation. Law 117, which allows your family to be enslaved for a debt, often leads to dispersal across households or estates. A tablet from Uruk describes a family split when a father and Nasar defaulted on a loan his wife sent to a temple, his son to a merchant's fields. If you're a war captive, your family might have been captured together, only to be sold separately at market, as recorded in a Larsa contract, where a mother and child were divided between two buyers. Marriage offers little solace. Law 176 stipulates that if a free person marries a slave, their children's status depends on the master's claim, often keeping them enslaved. You might fall in love with another slave, sharing whispered hopes while grinding barley, but your union requires approval, and children born are rarely yours to raise. Daily life erodes family ties further. You work long hours spinning wool or digging canals with little time to connect. If your family is in the same household, you might steal moments to share a meal of barley, porridge, or exchange stories of life before bondage. But separation is more common. Cuneiform records from Nippur show slaves housed in reed mat sheds, far from kin. You're fed just enough, about 1 liter of barley daily, per sipper, ledgers to keep working, leaving no surplus to support a family. Socially, you're an outcast, your shaved head or clay tag marking you as less than human, making it harder to maintain dignity or familial roles. Yet, resilience persists. You might barter extra rations, a handful of dates, for a chance to send a message to a distant spouse, as some slaves did in according to tablets. Others risk punishment to visit kin, sneaking to another estate under cover of night. These acts are small rebellions against the code's control. Temples, which own many slaves, are particularly rigid. A record from Larsa describes a slave mother punished for trying to see her child, reassigned to heavier tasks. Still, you cling to memories of family, perhaps humming a lullaby your mother taught you, preserving a thread of identity, your labor producing grain or cloth for trade to Marasestan's Babylon. But your family's loss is the hidden cost. The code's rules, meant to stabilize society, tear at its heart by breaking families apart. As you toil, a question lingers. Could you rebuild those bonds? Or does slavery's fracture run too deep? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a slave, you've felt the relentless strain of servitude tear at your family's bonds. The Code of Hammurabi, with its unyielding laws, has scattered your kinspouse to a temple, children to distant fields. Zor bound them to the same master, yet kept you apart. Your labor, whether weaving textiles or tending livestock, fuels the city's wealth, but the cost is your family's unity. Despite the code's grip, you've clung to fleeting moments of connection, risking punishment to preserve love or memory. The climax of your story lies in whether these fractured ties can be mended, or if slavery's weight will forever redefine your family. How did this system reshape kinship, and what legacy did it leave for Babylon and beyond? The code offers slim hope for reunification. For debt slaves, Law 117 promises release after 3 years, potentially reuniting families if the debt is cleared. But tablets from Sippar show creditors extending terms, trapping families in servitude. A record describes a mother in Annabellet, freed when her brother paid 30 shekels, but her child remained enslaved, claimed by the master under Law 175. War captives and those born into slavery face bleaker odds. Manumission is rare, granted only for exceptional service, like a slave in Uruk, freed for skilled brewing. Royal edicts, such as Amisadwa's in 1646 BC, occasionally canceled debts, freeing some families to rebuild, but these are rare. Driven by economic necessity to prevent unrest, you fight to maintain family ties through small acts. You might whisper stories of your village to a child during a shared task, or barter a woven mat for news of a distant spouse, as seen in Nippur records. These efforts come at a risk. Law 15 punishes unauthorized movement with branding, or worse. A tablet from Larsa tells of a slave father caught visiting his son, reassigned to grueling canal work. Yet, these connections sustain you, preserving a sense of self against the code's dehumanization. If your family is together, you share sparse rations, barley, and fish huddled in a cramped shed. Your moments of closeness stolen from exhausting days. Freedom, if achieved, is bittersweet. If released, you return to a society that stigmatizes former slaves, your family often scarred or incomplete. You might farm again, but the loss of years and kin lingers. The code's fracturing of families ensured Babylon's labor supply but sowed social tension, prompting edicts to restore balance. This system's legacy influenced later cultures. Syrian and biblical laws echo its rules on slavery and kinship. Like the Jubilees, call for family reunification. Your story, buried in cuneiform, reveals the human cost of Babylon's prosperity. Families were its hidden fuel, their bonds sacrificed for grain and cloth, traded to Dilmun. Today, modern systems' economic pressures, splitting families, mirror this dynamic. Less overt, but no less painful, the lesson is clear. Societies that prioritize order over human ties risk fragility, as broken families weaken the whole. How did Babylon's disregard for enslaved families shape its moral landscape? And what does it teach us about the value of kinship? Story 6: Paths to Freedom, the elusive dream of manumission in ancient Babylon. Around 1750 BCE, waking to the faint glow of dawn over the Euphrates, its waters reflecting the city's mud brick walls. The air carries the scent of barley and river reeds, but you are a slave, bound to a master's household or temple estate, your days filled with grinding grain or hauling bricks. The Code of Hammurabi, etched on a towering stele, governs your life with cold precision, offering faint glimmers of freedom through manumission, the rare act of a master granting liberty. For slaves, whether ensnared by debt, war, or birth, freedom is a distant dream, whispered in stolen moments between tasks. The path to manumission is fraught with obstacles, yet it shapes your hopes and survival. What did it take to achieve this elusive goal? And how did it define the lives of the enslaved? The code provides limited avenues for freedom. If you're a debt slave, Law 117 promises release after 3 years of service, provided the debt is settled. But creditors often extend terms, as seen in cuneiform tablets from Sippar. For war captives or those born into slavery, manumission depends on a master's goodwill or exceptional service. A tablet from Uruk records a slave named Mardukili freed for crafting fine pottery, but such cases are rare. Manumission might also occur through adoption, where a master claims a slave as family, or by royal edict, like those issued by kings to stabilize the economy. These paths are narrow, and most slaves toil without hope, their labor fueling Babylon's wealth in grain and textiles traded to Dilmun. Your daily life as a slave leaves little room for dreaming. You rise before dawn, eating a meager ration of barley, porridge, and fish, as noted in Larsa ledgers. You might weave wool in a household or repair irrigation canals, your hands calloused and back-aching. The code ensures your productivity. Law 146 allows harsher tasks for disobedience, keeping you in line. Socially, you're an outcast, marked by a shaved head or clay tag, shunned by free Babylonians in the market. Temples, major slaveholders, rely on you to clean altars or carry offerings, but you're barred from sacred rituals, reinforcing your isolation. Yet, the idea of freedom persists. You hear stories of slaves freed for loyalty, woman in Nippur released to serve as a temple dedicatee after years of weaving. These tales, etched in clay or shared in whispers, fuel your resilience. You might work harder, hoping to impress your master, or barter skills like brewing beer for favor. The risks are high. Defiance, even subtle, invites punishment under Law 15, which threatens death for aiding runaways. Your labor supports Babylon's trade, but the dream of manumission keeps you going, a fragile hope in a life of toil. The code's promise of freedom, though slim, reveals Babylon's complex balance of control and mercy. Your existence, bound by its laws, is a testament to endurance, but the path to liberty is uncertain. As you toil under the sun, a question lingers. Could you ever earn or seize that elusive freedom? Or is it a dream reserved for the fortunate few? In Babylon, 1750 BCE, you labor as a slave, your days consumed by repetitive tasks, spinning wool in a dim household or digging canals under the scorching sun. The Code of Hammurabi, with its rigid laws, holds you in bondage, but the dream of manumission freedom granted by a master or law keeps a flicker of hope alive. Whether you're a debt slave, war captive, or born into servitude, the paths to freedom are narrow, often requiring extraordinary effort or luck. The city thrives on your labor, producing grain and textiles for trade to Mari. Yet you remain an outcast, marked by a shaved head or clay tag. How did slaves pursue this elusive dream, and what sacrifices did it demand? The code offers specific but limited routes to freedom. For debt slaves, Law 117 promises release after 3 years, but cuneiform tablets from your reveal creditors often extend debts with high interest, trapping you longer. A record describes a slave named Synodinum, whose servitude continued 5 years due to added loans. War captives and those born enslaved rely on manumission, which might come from a master's gratitude or adoption. A tablet from Nippur tells of a slave, Ishtarbelet, freed after saving her master's child from a fire. But such acts are rare. Royal edicts, like those of Mesopotamia in 1646 BC, occasionally canceled debts to prevent economic collapse, freeing some, but these are unpredictable. You strive for freedom through careful strategy. You might excel at a task brewing beer or crafting bricks, hoping to earn favor. A sipper tablet records a slave gaining extra rations for skilled weaving. A step toward, you share stories with fellow slaves, whispering of those freed, like a man in Uruk, released to serve as a temple scribe. These tales sustain you, but the risks are steep. Attempting escape invites brutal punishment. Law 15 threatens death for aiding runaways, and a Larsa tablet describes a slave branded for fleeing to a marsh. Subtle defiance, like working slowly, risks reassignment to harsher tasks under Law 146. Daily life tests your resolve. You survive on sparse rations, barley and fish, per your ledgers barely enough to fuel your labor. Temples, where many slaves work, demand relentless effort. Cleaning altars or hauling offerings, with no access to rituals like the Akitu festival. Socially, you're shunned. Free citizens avoid you in markets, your status clear from your tattered tunic. Yet you build fragile bonds with other slaves, trading small favors, a repaired tool for a handful of dates to maintain hope. These networks, though risky, offer a sense of community. Your labor underpins Babylon's economy, but the dream of manumission drives you. The codes structure balancing control with rare mercy shows a society dependent on slaves, yet aware of its limits. As you toil, you weigh your options. Loyalty might earn freedom, but at what cost to your spirit? The stories of those freed are few, and the code's promises often feel hollow. Could you navigate this system to win your liberty, or is manumission a dream too distant to grasp? You've endured years of servitude in Babylon, 1750 BCE, your life shaped by the Code of Hammurabi's unyielding laws. As a slave, whether bound by debt, war, or birth, you've toiled in households or fields, producing grain and cloth that fuel the city's trade to Elam. The dream of the rare gift of freedom has sustained you through grueling days and sparse rations. You've heard tales of slaves freed for loyalty or by royal decree, yet the path remains treacherous, with punishments for defiance looming large. The climax of your story hinges on whether freedom is attainable and what it means for you and Babylon's society. How did the pursuit of manumission shape the enslaved, and what legacy did it leave? The code's paths to freedom are narrow. Debt slaves might gain release after 3 years under Law 117. But tablets from Sippar show creditors often manipulate debts, extending servitude. A record details a slave, Belatili, whose family paid 25 shekels for her freedom, only to find her child still enslaved under Law 175. For war captives or those born in bondage, manumission requires exceptional acts, perhaps saving a master's life or mastering a craft. A cuneiform text from Uruk describes a slave, Shamash Nasser, freed for skilled irrigation work, later adopted as a son. Rare royal edicts, like Amisadwa's in 1646 BCE, cancel debts to stabilize society, freeing some, but these are sporadic. You pursue freedom through resilience. You might perfect your weaving, hoping to impress your master, as seen in a Nippur tablet where a slave earned manumission for exceptional textiles. You share whispered hopes with others, building fragile networks, but the risks are high. Law 15 punishes escape attempts with branding or death, as a Larsa tablet recounts a slave recaptured and chained to a kiln. Your rations, barley, and dates keep you alive, but exhaustion and isolation, temples where you might sweep courtyards, offer no reprieve, barring you from rituals. If freedom comes, it's bittersweet. Released, you return to a society that stigmatizes former slaves. You might farm again, but scars from labor and social exclusion linger. A tablet from Yor describes a freed slave shunned by neighbors, struggling to rebuild. The code's rare mercies, like manumission, reveal Babylon's need to balance control with stability, preventing unrest from widespread bondage. This system's legacy shaped later laws, Assyrian codes, and biblical mandates, like the Jubilee echo its debt relief and rare freedoms. Your story, etched in clay, shows the human cost of Babylon's prosperity. Manumission, though rare, fueled hope, proving the enslaved could endure and sometimes overcome. Today, modern parallels economic systems, trapping people in cycles of labor, mirror this struggle, where freedom is hard-won. The lesson is clear. Societies built on exploitation need mechanisms like manumission to survive, but true freedom requires more than release. It demands acceptance. How did Babylon's fragile promise of manumission reflect its values, and what does it teach us about the cost of liberty? Story 7: Temple Slaves, serving the gods in bondage. In ancient Babylon, around 1750 BCE, standing in the shadow of a towering ziggurat, its steps gleaming under the Mesopotamian sun. The air is thick with incense and the chants of priests. But you are a slave, bound not to a household or field, but to the temple of Marduk, Babylon's chief god. Temples are the heart of the city's spiritual and economic life, owning vast estates and controlling much of its wealth. As a temple slave, your days are filled with tasks that serve both the divine and the priests who act as their intermediaries. The Code of Hammurabi governs your life, but the temple's sacred status adds a layer of divine weight to your servitude. What was it like to toil for the gods, and how did this sacred bondage shape your existence? Temple slaves, known as serk in Akkadian, are distinct from household or agricultural slaves. You might have been dedicated to the temple as a debt payment, a war captive, or born into servitude. A cuneiform tablet from Sippar records a debtor's daughter in Annabellet given to the temple of Shamash to settle a loan. Your tasks vary. You might sweep the temple courtyard, polish sacred vessels, or carry offerings of barley and dates to the altar. Unlike household slaves, your work is imbued with spiritual significance. Yet you're barred from participating in the rituals you support, such as the Akitu festival, where priests celebrate the new year. The Code of Hammurabi offers limited protections. Law 199 mandates fines for injuring a slave, but temple overseers are strict, and punishments for errors like spilling a sacred offering are severe, often involving lashings or reassignment to grueling tasks like brickmaking. A tablet from Nippur describes a slave flogged for dropping a clay lamp during a ritual. Your rations about 1 liter of barley daily per your ledgers are meager, supplemented by fish or onions, just enough to keep you working. You live in cramped reed-motte quarters near the temple. Your shaved head or clay tag marking you as property of the gods. Your labor is vital to the temple's economy. Temples own vast lands, and you might tend their fields or weave textiles for trade, supporting Babylon's commerce with regions like Elam. A record from Larsa details temple slaves producing surplus grain for export. Socially, you're an outcast. Even free worshippers avoid you, their eyes fixed on the ziggurats' peak. Yet, you find fleeting connection with other slaves, sharing whispers of life before bondage, while cleaning altars under starlit skies. The temple's divine aura makes your servitude feel heavier. You're not just serving priests, but the gods themselves. Yet your role is menial, your humanity diminished. The code allows for manumission, but temple slaves are rarely freed, as their labor is deemed a sacred offering. As you toil, you wonder, could you ever escape this divine bondage, or is serving the gods a chain as unbreakable as any other? The sun sets over Babylon, 1750 BCE, casting long shadows from the ziggurat, where you, a temple slave, labor for the gods. Your life is bound to the temple of Marduk or Shamash, your tasks cleaning altars, weaving cloth, or tending sacred fields infused with divine purpose, yet steeped in drudgery. The Code of Hammurabi, with its 282 laws, governs your existence, offering slim protections but enforcing your servitude under the watchful eyes of priests. As a serk, your bondage carries the weight of sacred duty, making freedom through manumission or escape even harder to grasp. How did temple slaves endure this divine servitude, and what strategies did they use to navigate its constraints? Your daily routine is relentless. You might polish bronze statues of deities, your hands stained with oil, or carry heavy jars of beer for offerings, as recorded in a Sippar tablet detailing temple inventories. Mistakes are costly. A Larsa record describes a slave in Lalami reassigned to canal digging after breaking a sacred vessel, a punishment allowed by Law 146 for disobedience. Your rations barley, fish, and dates, per your ledgers, are sparse, barely sustaining you for the temple's endless demands. You sleep in cramped quarters near the temple, the chants of priests a constant reminder of your exclusion from rituals like the Akitu festival. The code's laws shape your life with precision. Law 199 offers fines for severe injury, but temple overseers, seen as divine agents, rarely face scrutiny. Escape is nearly impossible. Law 15 threatens death for aiding runaways, and a nipper tablet recounts a slave caught fleeing, branded, and returned to temple labor. You learn to survive by excelling in tasks, perhaps weaving fine linen for priestly robes, hoping to earn favor. A tablet from Uruk notes a slave gaining extra rations for skilled brewing, a small step toward. You might trade favors with other slaves' amended tunic for a shared story building. Fragile bonds in a world that isolates you socially. You're invisible. Free worshippers offering prayers at the Ziggurat ignore your presence, your shaved head marking you as the god's property. Yet the temple's economic power relies on you. You produce grain and textiles, supporting trade to Mari, as seen in Larsa records of temple exports. The sacred nature of your work adds a cruel irony. You serve the gods, but are denied their blessings. Manumission is rare. Temples, unlike households, view slaves as eternal offerings. A Sipper record describes a slave freed to become a temple dedicatee, but such cases are exceptional, often tied to royal decrees like Amisadwa's death. Cancellations in 1646 BCE, you cling to small acts of resilience, humming a tune from your past, or sharing a glance with a fellow slave while stacking bricks. These moments defy the temple's dehumanization, but the dream of freedom feels distant. The code's balance of control and rare mercy reflects Babylon's need for stability. Yet your sacred bondage feels eternal. As you labor under the ziggurat's shadow, a question haunts you. Could you ever break free from the god's service? Or is this divine chain unbreakable? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a temple slave, you've toiled under the sacred weight of the ziggurat, serving the gods through menial tasks, polishing altars, weaving cloth, or tending fields. The Code of Hammurabi binds you, its laws offering faint hope of freedom while enforcing your divine servitude. Your labor powers the temple's wealth, fueling Babylon's trade to Elam. Yet you remain an outcast, excluded from the rituals you enable. The dream of manumission released from this sacred bondage has sustained you, but its rarity and the temple's grip make it elusive. The climax of your story hinges on whether freedom is possible and what it means for you and Babylon's divine order. How did temple slavery shape its servants, and what legacy did it leave? Freedom is harder for temple slaves than others. The Code's Law 117, which frees debt slaves after 3 years, rarely applies, as temples claim you as divine property. A Sipper tablet describes a debt slave, Belatili, kept indefinitely by the temple of Shamash, despite her term's end. Manumission requires extraordinary service or a rare act of priestly mercy, as seen in a Nipper record of a slave freed for crafting a sacred statue. Royal edicts like Amisadwas in 1646 BCE, occasionally free debt slaves to ease social tension, but temples often resist, citing divine will. Your hope lies in excelling, perhaps brewing ritual beer impeccably. As a Uruk slave did to gain release, you endure through subtle resilience. You might share a hymn with fellow slaves while hauling grain, preserving a shred of identity, as seen in your records of slaves exchanging songs. Escape is futile. Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways and temple oversight make flight impossible. A Larsa tablet recounts a slave branded for attempting escape, returned to altar duties. Punishments for errors, like spilling offerings, are harsh. Law 146 allows reassignment to grueling canal work. Your rations, barley and fish, sustain you barely, and the temple's sacred aura isolates you from free worshippers. If freed, you face a stigmatized life. A tablet from Yor describes a freed temple slave, shunned, struggling to farm with a worn body. The temple's reliance on slaves reveals Babylon's paradox. Divine worship rested on human exploitation. This system's legacy influenced later religious institutions, from Assyrian temples to biblical laws emphasizing sacred service. Your story, etched in cuneiform, shows the cost of divine grandeur. Slaves like you were its unseen foundation. Today, parallels exist in systems where labor serves higher ideals yet dehumanizes workers. The lesson is stark. Sacred or secular, exploitation erodes a society's moral core. Babylon's temples thrived on your toil, but their stability required rare acts of mercy to prevent collapse. Your resilience, clinging to hope amid divine bondage, speaks to humanity's endurance. How did Babylon's sacred slavery reflect its values? And what does it teach us about the cost of devotion? Story 8: The Economic Engine. Slavery's role in Babylonian prosperity in ancient Babylon. Around 1750 BCE, where the Euphrates River sparkles under the sun, nourishing the city's fertile fields and bustling markets. As a slave, you toil in the heart of this economic machine, whether grinding barley in a household, weaving textiles, or digging irrigation canals. The Code of Hammurabi governs your existence, ensuring your labor fuels Babylon's wealth while keeping you bound. The city's prosperity, its towering ziggurats, vibrant trade with Elam, and surplus grain rests on the backs of slaves like you, whose work drives the economy. Yet you're an outcast, marked by a shaved head or clay tag, your life reduced to a cog in this thriving system. What was slavery's role in Babylon's economic success, and how did it shape the lives of those who powered it? Slavery was integral to Babylon's economy, providing the labor that sustained agriculture, trade, and infrastructure. As a slave, you might work on temple estates, producing barley or sesame for export, as recorded in cuneiform tablets from Larsa detailing temple harvests. Households rely on you for domestic tasks, spinning wool or brewing beer, freeing free citizens for commerce or governance. The Code of Hammurabi reinforces this system. Law 117 allows families to be enslaved for debts, ensuring a steady labor supply. A tablet from Sippar records a debtor's wife laboring 3 years to clear a loan, her work feeding the city's markets. Your daily life is grueling. You rise before dawn, eating sparse rations, about 1 liter of barley daily. per your ledger supplemented with fish or dates. You might haul goods from riverboats to warehouses, your back aching under heavy sacks, or maintain canals vital for irrigation, as Babylon's agriculture depends on them. A Nippur tablet describes slaves clearing silt from canals, their labor enabling bumper crops traded as far as Dilmun. The Code's Law 146 threatens harsher tasks for disobedience, keeping you productive under an overseer's watchful eye. Socially, you're invisible. Free merchants and scribes pass you in the market, avoiding your gaze, your status clear from your tattered tunic. Temples, major slaveholders, use you to clean altars or weave ritual garments, but you're barred from sacred rites like the Akitu festival. Your labor's scale is immense. Tablets from Uruk show slaves producing textiles exported to Mari, linking your toil to Babylon's regional dominance. Yet, your role is unacknowledged, your existence reduced to quotas etched in clay. The Code's structure reveals Babylon's reliance on slavery. It balances control with rare mercies, like Law 117's promise of release for debt slaves. Though creditors often extend terms, your work drives the city's wealth, but you reap no reward. As you toil, a question lingers. How did your unseen labor shape Babylon's golden age? And what did it cost you to sustain a society that thrives on your bondage? In Babylon, 1750 BCE, you labor as a slave, your hands calloused from weaving textiles or digging canals that sustain the city's fields. The Code of Hammurabi binds you, its laws ensuring your toil powers Babylon's economic engine, its markets, temples, and trade routes to Mari. Your work produces the grain, cloth, and goods that make the city a hub of wealth. Yet you remain a shadow, marked by a clay tag or shaved head. The Code's rules, like Law 117, offer faint hope of freedom, but your labor is the backbone of a system that thrives on your subjugation. How did slaves navigate this economic machine, and what strategies kept them going in a world that profited from their pain? Your role is critical to Babylon's prosperity. In households, you might grind barley or brew beer, freeing free women for other tasks, as seen in Uruk tablets listing domestic quotas. On temple estates, you plant sesame or harvest dates, your labor yielding surplus for trade, per Larsa records. Infrastructure, like canals, depends on Nippur tablets describe slaves maintaining irrigation systems, enabling agriculture that feeds distant markets. The Code reinforces this. Law 146 punishes slack work with harsher tasks, ensuring productivity. A Sippar tablet recounts a slave reassigned to brickmaking for failing to meet a weaving quota. His hands burned by kilns. You survive by adapting. You might excel at a craft like brewing to gain favor. As your record notes a slave earning extra rations for skilled work. Small acts of resistance, hiding a handful of grain or working slowly, carry risks. Law 15 threatens death for aiding runaways, and a Larsa tablet describes a slave branded for stealing dates. You build fragile networks with other slaves, trading a repaired tool for a shared story, as seen in Nippur records. These bonds offer solace, though betrayal is a risk, as overseers reward informants. Your life is grueling. Rations, barley, fish, and onions barely sustain you, per your ledgers. You sleep in cramped reed mat sheds, exhausted from dawn to dusk labor. Socially, you're shunned. Free citizens avoid you in markets, and temples bar you from rituals like the Akitu. Your labor's impact is vast. Textiles and grain you produce reach Elam, fueling Babylon's trade dominance. Yet, the code's protections, like Law 199's fines for injury, are rarely enforced, leaving you vulnerable to an overseer's whip. The economic system's reliance on slavery reveals its fragility. Widespread debt bondage, as per Law 117, prompts occasional royal edicts, like Amisadwa's in 1646 BCE, to cancel debts and free slaves, preventing unrest. Your toil builds Babylon's wealth, but the human cost is immense. As you labor, you wonder, could you ever escape this economic machine? Or does its prosperity depend on your eternal bondage? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a slave, you've toiled tirelessly, your labor weaving the fabric of the city's prosperity. Whether harvesting barley, crafting textiles, or maintaining canals, your work powers Babylon's markets and trade with Dilmun. The Code of Hammurabi binds you, its laws, like Law 117, offering rare hope of freedom while ensuring your subjugation. You're a vital cog in this economic engine, yet your life is marked by exhaustion, isolation, and the faint dream of manumission. The climax of your story lies in whether you can escape this system, and what your labor's cost means for Babylon's legacy. How did slavery drive the city's wealth, and what did it reveal about its society? Your contribution is undeniable. Temple estates, as per Larsa, tablets rely on slaves like you to produce surplus grain, fueling trade to Mari. Households depend on your domestic work grinding flour or brewing beer, freeing free citizens for governance, as seen in Uruk records. Infrastructure, like canals, thrives on your sweat. A Nippur tablet credits slaves with enabling bumper harvests through irrigation maintenance. The Code's Law 146 ensures your productivity with threats of harsher tasks, while Law 15 deters escape with severe penalties. A Sipper tablet describes a slave branded for fleeing, returned to canal work. You endure through resilience. You might perfect a skill, like weaving, to gain favor, as your record notes a slave freed for exceptional cloth. Small rebellions sharing rations or slowing work carry risks. A Larsa tablet recounts a slave punished for hiding grain. You form bonds with others, trading stories for solace, but the code's punishments loom. Your rations, barley and fish barely sustain you, and you're shunned in markets, excluded from rituals like the Akitu. Freedom, when it comes, is rare. Law 117's 3-year limit for debt slaves is often extended, but royal edicts, like Amisadwa's in 1646 BCE, occasionally free some to stabilize society. If freed, you face stigma. Your tablet describes a former slave struggling to farm, shunned by neighbors. Babylon's wealth, built on your labor, came at a human cost. The Code's reliance on slavery, balanced by rare mercies, reveals a society aware of its fragility. Acts prevented unrest from mass bondage. This system influenced later cultures. Assyrian and biblical laws echo its labor dynamics. Your story, etched in clay, shows slavery as Babylon's foundation and flaw today. Modern economies with exploitative labor mirror this tension. The lesson is clear. Prosperity built on subjugation is unstable, as human resilience outlasts oppression. How did Babylon's economic reliance on slavery shape its rise and fall, and what does it teach us about the cost of wealth? Story 9: Resistance and Resilience. Defying bondage in Babylonian in ancient Babylon, around 1750 BCE, where the Euphrates glimmers and the city thrives with markets and towering ziggurats. As a slave, your life is bound by the Code of Hammurabi, its laws dictating your labor grinding barley, weaving textiles, or digging canals. The steely's shadow looms, enforcing your servitude with threats of punishment, yet within you burns a spark of defiance. Resistance, whether subtle or bold, is a dangerous act of reclaiming your humanity in a system that sees you as property. Marked by a shaved head or clay tag, you're an outcast, yet you find ways to endure and defy. What did resistance look like for Babylon's slaves, and how did their resilience shape their lives? The Code of Hammurabi is unforgiving. Law 15 threatens death for aiding runaways, making escape a deadly gamble. A tablet from Larsa records a slave in Lilbani, branded for fleeing to a marsh, returned to harsher labor. Law 146 allows masters to reassign disobedient slaves to grueling tasks like brickmaking in scorching kilns. Yet, resistance persists in small ways. You might work slowly, feigning exhaustion, or hide a handful of grain, as seen in a sipper tablet where a slave was punished for hoarding barley. These acts, though risky, assert your agency in a world that denies it. Your daily life is a battle for survival. You rise before dawn, eating meager rations, barley, porridge, and fish, per your ledgers barely enough to sustain you. You might weave wool in a household or haul reeds for temple construction, always under an overseer's eye. Socially, you're shunned. Free Babylonians avoid you in markets, your tattered tunic a sign of your status. Temples, major slaveholders, rely on you to clean altars or carry offerings, but bar you from rituals like the Akitu festival. A nipper tablet describes a slave flogged for spilling a sacred vessel, a reminder of your precarious place. Yet, resilience thrives in quiet bonds. You share whispers with fellow slaves, trading stories of life before bondage or bartering a mended tool for extra rations, as seen in Uruk records. These networks defy the code's isolation, offering solace. Your labor fuels Babylon's economy, grain and textiles traded to Elam, but your defiance, however small, challenges its control. The code's rare mercies, like Law 117's promise of release for debt slaves after 3 years, are often undermined by creditors. Yet stories of freedom fuel your hope. Resistance comes at a cost, but it defines you. As you toil, you wonder, could these small acts of defiance slow work, shared glances, or hidden grain chip away at the system's power? Or will they only invite its wrath? Your resilience is a testament to your humanity in a city built on your subjugation. The sun beats down on Babylon, 1750 BCE, as you, a slave, labor under the Code of Hammurabi's iron grip. Your days filled with weaving cloth or clearing canals. Your existence powers the city's wealth, its grain and textiles traded to Mariette. You're a shadow, marked by a clay tag, shunned by free citizens. The Code's laws, like Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways, crush overt rebellion, but your resilience shines in subtle defiance. Whether through slowed work or whispered bonds with fellow slaves, you resist the dehumanization of bondage. How did slaves sustain this defiance? And what did it cost to preserve their humanity in Babylon's oppressive system? Resistance takes many forms, often invisible. You might deliberately tangle a loom's threads to delay a quota, a tactic noted in a sipper tablet where a slave was lashed for careless weaving. Or you hide a few dates from your rations to share with a sick companion, risking punishment under Law 7 for theft. Escape is rare. A Larsa tablet describes a slave, Shamashili, caught fleeing to a riverbank, chained to a millstone as per Law 17. The Code's Law 146 ensures compliance, reassigning defiant slaves to brutal tasks like kill work, where heat and dust scar your lungs. You survive by forging connections. You trade a mended sandal for a story of home, as seen in Uruk records of slaves' bartering skills. These networks, though fragile, defy the Code's isolation. You might hum a forbidden tune while hauling bricks, a quiet rebellion against the temple's rules, barring you from rituals like the Akitu, your rations barley and fish. Per your ledger, meager and hunger tempts risky acts like stealing grain. A nipper tablet recounts a slave flogged for hiding food, yet these acts assert your will. Socially, you're invisible. Free merchants in Babylon's markets ignore you, your status clear from your tattered tunic. Temples, where you might clean altars, enforce strict oversight. A Larsa record notes a slave punished for lingering near a sacred statue. Yet you find strength in shared glances or whispered plans, building a hidden community. Your labor-producing cloth for trade to Elam drives Babylon's economy, but your defiance challenges its foundation. The Code's rare promises, like Law 117's 3-year release for debt slaves, are often thwarted by creditors, as seen in sipper tablets. Your resilience is a quiet fire. Stories of manumishina, slave freed in your 4-skilled brewing fuel hope. But resistance risks everything. The Code's balance of control and mercy reflects Babylon's need to exploit, yet stabilize its labor force. As you toil, you weigh the cost. Can your subtle defiance load work? Shared rations or whispered songs wode the system's grip, or will it only deepen your suffering? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a slave, you've endured the Code of Hammurabi's relentless control. Your labor fueling the city's wealth, while your defiance, subtle or bold, keeps your humanity alive. Whether weaving textiles or digging canals, you've resisted through slowed work, hidden rations, or whispered bonds, each act a risk under laws like Law 15, which punishes escape harshly. Your resilience has sustained you, but the system's weights, punishments, and isolation. The climax of your story lies in whether this defiance can alter your fate or Babylon's oppressive order. How did slave resistance shape their lives, and what legacy did it leave? The Code's punishments are brutal. Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways deters flight. Your tablet recounts a slave in Anazu, recaptured and chained for attempting escape. Law 146 reassigns defiant slaves to grueling tasks, like kill work. As a Sipper record notes, a slave burned for slowing a harvest. Yet, you resist quietly perhaps, tangling wool to delay quotas, or sharing a fish with a hungry peer, as seen in Nipper tablets. These acts, though small, defy the code's dehumanization. A Larsa record describes slaves singing forbidden hymns, risking lashes to preserve identity. You endure through community. You barter skilza, mended hoe, for Astoria's Uruk tablets show, building networks that defy isolation. Your rations barley and dates barely sustain you, and temples bar you from rituals like the Akitu, but shared glances offer solace. Freedom is elusive. Law 117's promise for debt slaves is often undermined, as Sipper tablets show creditors extending terms. Manumission, like a your slave freed for skilled weaving, is rare but fuels hope. Royal edicts, like Amisadwa's in 1646 BCE, occasionally free slaves to prevent unrest, but most remain bound. If freed, you face stigma. Your tablet describes a former slave, shunned, struggling to farm. Your Defiance small acts of resistance challenged Babylon's system, revealing its fragility. The code's need for edicts shows a society strained by exploitation. This legacy influenced later laws. Syrian and biblical codes echo its tension between control and mercy. Your story, etched in clay, proves resilience outlasts oppression. As slaves, subtle rebellions sowed seeds of change. Today, parallels exist in systems where workers resist exploitation through quiet defiance. Babylon's reliance on slaves built wealth but exposed cracks. Resistance hinted at collapse. Your legacy is endurance, showing humanity persists even in chains. How did your defiance reflect Babylon's flaws? And what does it teach us about resilience against injustice? Story 10. The Social Outcast. Slavery's Mark on Identity and Belaginger in Ancient Babylon. Around 1750 BCE, where the Euphrates River shimmers and the city hums with vibrant markets and towering ziggurats. As a slave, you toil under the Code of Hammurabi's strict laws, grinding barley, weaving textiles, or digging canals. But beyond your labor, slavery brands you as an outcast, stripping you of identity and belonging. Marked by a shaved head or clay tag, you're shunned by free Babylonians, your humanity reduced to property in their eyes. The code governs your existence, enforcing your isolation while your work fuels the city's prosperity. What did it mean to live as a social outcast in Babylon, and how did this shape your sense of self? The Code of Hammurabi reinforces your exclusion. Law 146 allows harsher tasks for disobedience, ensuring your labor, while Law 15 threatens death for aiding runaways, trapping you in servitude. A Sipper tablet records a slave, Enlobani, branded for fleeing, his mark a permanent sign of shame. Whether you're a debt slave, war captive, or born into bondage, your status is visibly. Your tattered tunic and shaved head signal your place. Socially, you're invisible. Free citizens in markets avoid your gaze, and priests bar you from rituals like the Akitu festival, as noted in Nipper records. Your daily life is grueling. You rise before dawn, eating sparse rations, barley, porridge, and fish, per your ledgers, barely enough to sustain you. You might weave wool in a household, or haul reeds for temple construction, always under an overseer's watchful eye. A Larsa tablet describes a slave flogged for spilling a sacred offering, a reminder of your precarious status. Your labor produces grain and textiles traded to Elam, but you gain no recognition, only the weight of exclusion. Temples, major slaveholders, rely on you to clean altars. Yet you're denied spiritual connection. You might whisper stories of your past, perhaps a village where you farmed during brief moments with other slaves, as seen in Uruk records of shared tales. These connections, though risky, defy the code's isolation. You could be a debt slave under Law 117, hoping for release after 3 years. But creditors often extend terms, as Sipper tablets show. Your shaved head or clay tag marks you, but your memories and small acts of defiance, like humming a forbidden tune, assert your humanity. Babylon's wealth depends on your toil, yet it casts you out. The code's structure, balancing control with rare mercies, reveals a society built on exclusion. As you labor, you wonder, could you reclaim a sense of self and belonging? Or does slavery's mark forever define you in this thriving city? In Babylon, 1750 BCE, you labor as a slave. Your days consumed by weaving cloth or digging canals under the Code of Hammurabi's unyielding laws. Your work fuels the city's trade to Mari, but slavery marks you as an outcast. Your shaved head or clay tag a constant reminder of your exclusion. Free citizens shun you in markets, and temples bar you from rituals like the Akitu festival. Yet, within this isolation, you cling to fragments of identity, memories, stories, or subtle defiance. The code enforces your status, but your resilience seeks to reclaim a sense of self. How did slaves navigate this social exile, and what did it cost to preserve their humanity? The code's laws cement your isolation. Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways traps you. As a Larsa tablet describes a slave, Shamashili, branded for fleeing to a riverbank. Law 146 threatens harsher tasks for defiance, like kill work, where heat scars your hands, as seen in a Sipper record of a slave punished for slow weaving. Your status is visible. Tattered tunics and marks set you apart. Free Babylonians trading in bustling markets. Avoid your gaze, while priests, per Nipper tablets, exclude you from sacred spaces. Reinforcing your outsider status, you endure through small acts of resistance. You might share a tale of your village with a fellow slave while hauling bricks, as Uruk records note, preserving memories against the code's erasure. Or you hum a forbidden hymn, risking a lashing, as a Larsa tablet recounts slaves punished for singing. Your rations, barley and fish, per your ledgers are meager, tempting you to hide a handful, a risky act under Law 7's theft penalties. These efforts assert your identity, though they invite punishment, like a Nipper slave flogged for lingering near a temple altar. Community sustains you. You barter skills, a mended tool for a shared fishaz seen in your records, forging bonds that defy isolation. These networks, though fragile, offer a sense of belonging, despite the risk of betrayal by overseers, informants. Your labor producing textiles or grain for Elam powers Babylon's economy, yet you're denied its rewards. The code's rare mercies, like Law 117's 3-year release for debt slaves, are often thwarted by creditors, as Sipper tablets show, leaving manumission a distant hope. Your resilience is a quiet rebellion against social exile. Stories of freedom, your slave freed for skilled brewing, fuel your spirit. The code's balance of control and mercy reflects Babylon's reliance on your labor while fearing unrest. As you toil, you wonder, can these acts of defiance, shared stories, hidden rations, or whispered songs reclaim your identity? Or will slavery's mark forever bar you from belonging? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a slave, you've toiled under the Code of Hammurabi's harsh laws, your labor weaving Babylon's wealth, while your status as an outcast, marked by a shaved head or clay tag, strips you of belonging. You've resisted through whispered stories, shared rations, and subtle defiance. Each act a claim to your humanity. The code's punishments, like Law 15's threat of death for escape, loom large, yet your resilience persists. The climax of your story lies in whether you can reclaim your identity or if slavery's mark will define you forever. How did social exclusion shape slaves' lives? And what legacy did their struggle leave? The code enforces your isolation with precision. Law 15, Debtor's Flight. Your tablet recounts a slave in Anazu, chained for fleeing, her mark a lifelong stigma. Law 146 punishes defiance with grueling tasks. As a Sipper record notes, a slave reassigned to kilns for slow work. Your visible status-tattered tunic or shaved head sets you apart. As free citizens shun you in markets and temples, exclude you from rituals like the Akitu per Nipper tablets. Yet, you resist by preserving memories, sharing tales of your past while weaving, as Uruk records show, or hiding a fish to share. Risking Law 7's penalties, community is your lifeline. You trade a mended hoe for a story, as your tablets describe, building fragile bonds that defy the code's isolation. These acts carry risks, overseers, reward betrayal, but offer belonging. Your rations, barley and dates, barely sustain you, and your labor powers trade to Elam, yet you're denied its fruits. Freedom is rare. Law 117's promise for debt slaves is often extended, as Sipper tablets show, but manumission stories, like your slave freed for skilled weaving, fuel hope. Royal edicts, like Amisadwa's in 1646 BCE, free some to ease tensions, but most remain outcasts. If freed, stigma lingers. Your tablet describes a former slave shunned, struggling to farm. Your resilience defying exile through stories and bonds challenged Babylon's system, exposing its reliance on exclusion. The code's mercies reveal a society balancing control with stability, as edicts prevented unrest. This legacy shaped later Law Caesarean and biblical codes echo its tension. Your story, etched in clay, shows humanity enduring despite ostracism. Today, parallels exist in marginalized groups resisting exclusion. Babylon's wealth relied on outcasts like you, but your defiance sowed seeds of change. The lesson is clear. Societies built on exclusion risk fragility, as resilience outlasts oppression. How did your struggle reflect Babylon's flaws, and what does it teach us about identity and belonging? Story 11. Women in Chains, Gender and Slavery in Babylonian Society in Ancient Babylon, around 1750 BCE. where the Euphrates River gleams, and the city thrives, with bustling markets and soaring ziggurats. As a female slave, your life is doubly bound by the chains of servitude and the constraints of gender under the Code of Hammurabi. Whether enslaved through debt, war, or birth, you toil in households or temples, grinding grain, weaving textiles, or nursing children. Your gender shapes your tasks and vulnerabilities, marking you as both laborer and property in a patriarchal society. The code dictates your fate, offering slim protections while enforcing your subjugation. What was it like to be a woman in slavery, and how did gender shape your experience in Babylon? The Code of Hammurabi addresses female slaves explicitly, often tying their fate to their roles as women. Law 117 allows you, as a debt slave, to be taken with your family to settle alone, serving up to 3 years, but creditors often extend terms, as seen in Sipper tablets. A record describes a woman, Inanna Bellet, enslaved with her children for a barley debt. If you're a war captive or born enslaved, your labor is gendered spinning, wool, or cooking, tasks deemed women's work. Law 175 notes that children of a free man and a slave woman remain enslaved if claimed by the master, tying your reproductive role to bondage. Your daily life is grueling. You rise before dawn, eating sparse rations, barley, porridge, and fish. Per your ledgers, barely enough to sustain you. You might weave textiles in a household, your fingers raw from wool, or care for a master's children, as a Larsa tablet describes a slave nurse punished for a child's cry. The Code's Law 146 threatens harsher tasks for disobedience, like cleaning ovens, while Law 15 deters escape with death for aiders. Socially, you're an outcast, your shaved head or clay tag signaling your status, shunned by free women in markets. Your gender heightens your vulnerability. You face sexual exploitation with little recourse. Law 199's fines for injury are rarely enforced for women. A Nipper tablet recounts a slave woman flogged for refusing an overseer's advances. Yet, you find resilience in small acts, sharing stories with other women while weaving, as Uruk records show, or hiding a bit of cloth to trade for extra food. These bonds defy the code's isolation, preserving a shred of identity. Your labor textiles or child care fuels Babylon's economy, traded to Elam, but your gendered role deepens your subjugation. The code's laws reflect a society where women, especially slaves, are doubly oppressed. As you toil, you wonder, could you preserve your sense of self as a woman in this system? Or does slavery's grip, compounded by gender, erase your identity entirely? In Babylon, 1750 BCE, you, a female slave, labor under the Code of Hammurabi's rigid laws. Your days spent weaving textiles or tending children in a household or temple. Your gender and enslavement intertwine, assigning you tasks like spinning wool or cooking, while exposing you to unique vulnerabilities in a patriarchal society. The city's wealth eats grain and cloth, traded to merrier lies on your toil. Yet, you're an outcast, marked by a clay tag, shunned by free women. The code enforces your bondage, but you resist through subtle acts, seeking to preserve your identity as a woman. How did female slaves navigate this dual oppression, and what did it cost to maintain their humanity? The code's laws underscore your gendered servitude. Law 117 binds you as a debt slave, often with your children. As a Sipper tablet records a woman, Ishtarami, enslaved for her husband's loan. Law 175 ties your reproductive role to bondage. Your children, if born to a free man, may remain enslaved. Your tasks are gendered. A Larsa tablet describes a slave woman reassigned to grinding grain after failing at weaving. Per Law 146's punishment for disobedience. Escape is perilous. Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways traps you. As a Nipper tablet recounts a woman branded for fleeing. Your daily life is exhausting. You survive on meager rations, barley and fish, per your ledgers. While weaving or nursing, your hands worn and eyes weary. You're vulnerable to exploitation. A Sipper record notes a slave woman punished for resisting an overseer's demands. With Law 199's protections rarely applied. Socially, your invisible free women in markets ignore you, and temples bar you from rituals like the Akitu. Yet you resist quietly, sharing stories of your past with other women while spinning wool, as Uruk tablets show, or hiding a scrap of cloth to barter for extra food. Risking Law 7's theft penalties. Community sustains you. You bond with other female slaves, trading a mended garment for a shared memory. As your records note, defying the code's isolation. These acts carry risks. Overseers punish defiance harshly, but offer a sense of sisterhood. Your labor textiles for Elam or childcare drives Babylon's economy, yet you're denied its rewards. Manumission is rare. Law 117's promise of release is often thwarted by creditors, but stories of freedom, like a Your woman freed for skilled weaving, fuel hope. Your resilience as a woman in chains is a quiet rebellion. The code's patriarchal structure reveals Babylon's reliance on your gendered labor, yet your defiance through stories or shared rations challenges it. As you toil, you wonder, can these acts preserve your identity as a woman, or will the dual weight of slavery and gender erase your sense of self? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a female slave, you've endured the Code of Hammurabi's dual oppression of slavery and gender. Your labor weaving textiles or nursing children fuels the city's wealth. Traded to Elam, yet you're an outcast, marked by a clay tag, shunned by society. You've resisted through whispered stories, shared rations, and subtle defiance, each act a claim to your identity as a woman. The code's laws, like Law 117's promise of release or Law 15's punishment for escape, shape your fate, but your resilience persists. The climax of your story lies in whether you can reclaim your sense of self, or if slavery's gendered chains will define you. How did gender and slavery intertwine, and what legacy did this leave? The code deepens your subjugation. Law 117 binds you and your children to debt slavery, often extended as a Sipper tablet shows a woman, Belatili, kept beyond her term. Law 175 ensures your children, born to a free man, may remain enslaved, tying your motherhood to bondage. A Larsa tablet describes a slave woman reassigned to grueling kitchen work for slow weaving, per Law 146 in Babylon, 1750 BCE. You, a female slave, labor under the Code of Hammurabi's rigid laws. Your days spent weaving textiles or tending children in a household or temple. Your gender and enslavement intertwine, assigning you tasks like spinning wool or cooking, while exposing you to unique vulnerabilities in a patriarchal society. The city's wealth, its grain and cloth traded to merrier lies on your toil. Yet you're an outcast, marked by a clay tag, shunned by free women. The code enforces your bondage, but you resist through subtle acts, seeking to preserve your identity as a woman. How did female slaves navigate this dual oppression? And what did it cost to maintain their humanity? The code's laws underscore your gendered servitude. Law 117 binds you as a debt slave, often with your children. As a Sipper tablet records a woman, Ishtarami, enslaved for her husband's loan. Law 175 ties your reproductive role to bondage. Your children, if born to a free man, may remain enslaved. Your tasks are gendered. A Larsa tablet describes a slave woman reassigned to grinding grain after failing at weaving. Per Law 146's punishment for disobedience. Escape is perilous. Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways traps you. As a Nipper tablet recounts a woman branded for fleeing. Your daily life is exhausting. You survive on meager rations, barley and fish, per your ledgers, while weaving or nursing, your hands worn and eyes weary. You're vulnerable to exploitation. A Sipper record notes a slave woman punished for resisting an overseer's demands, with Law 199's protections rarely applied. Socially, your invisible free women in markets ignore you, and temples bar you from rituals like the Akitu, yet you resist quietly, sharing stories of your past with other women while spinning wool, as Uruk tablets show, or hiding a scrap of cloth to barter for extra food, risking Law 7's theft penalties. Community sustains you. You bond with other female slaves, trading a mended garment for a shared memory. As your records note, defying the code's isolation, these acts carry risks. Overseers punish defiance harshly, but offer a sense of sisterhood. Your labor textiles for Elam or childcare drives Babylon's economy, yet you're denied its rewards. Manumission is rare. Law 117's promise of release is often thwarted by creditors, but stories of freedom, like a Your woman freed for skilled weaving, fuel hope. Your resilience as a woman in chains is a quiet rebellion. The code's patriarchal structure reveals Babylon's reliance on your gendered labor, yet your defiance through stories or shared rations challenges it. As you toil, you wonder, can these acts preserve your identity as a woman, or will the dual weight of slavery and gender erase your sense of self? Story 12, Children of Bondage. The lives of slave children in Babylon, in ancient Babylon, around 1750 BCE, where the Euphrates River sparkles and the city thrives with bustling markets and towering ziggurats. As a child born into slavery, your life is shaped by the Code of Hammurabi, its laws binding you to labor and stripping you of childhood's freedoms. Whether your parents were debt slaves, war captives, or born enslaved, you inherit their chains, marked by a clay tag or shaved head. You toil in households or temples, fetching water or sweeping floors, your small hands vital to Babylon's wealth. What was it like to grow up in bondage, and how did the code shape the lives of slave children? The Code of Hammurabi explicitly governs your fate. Law 117 allows families, including children, to be enslaved for debts, serving up to 3 years, but creditors often extend terms, as seen in Sipper tablets. A record describes a boy, Marduk Nasser, enslaved with his mother for a barley loan. Law 175 states that children of a free person and a slave remain enslaved if claimed by the master, tying your birth to bondage. You might be separated from parents, sold to another household. As a Larsa tablet notes, a child sold to a temple while his mother labored elsewhere. Your daily life is relentless. You rise at dawn, eating meager rations, barley, porridge, and fish, per your ledgers, barely enough to sustain your growing body. You might carry reeds for temple construction or grind grain in a household, your tasks scaled to your size but grueling. A Nipper tablet describes a child flogged for dropping a water jar, per Law 146's punishment for errors. Socially, you're an outcast. Free children mock you in markets, and you're barred from rituals like the Akitu festival, reinforcing your isolation. Despite this, you find resilience. You share whispered stories with other slave children while hauling baskets, as Uruk records show, clinging to tales of your parents' lives. You might hide a date from your rations to trade for a toy, risking Law 7's theft penalties. These small acts defy the code's dehumanization, preserving a spark of childhood. Your labor carrying goods or cleaning altar supports Babylon's trade to Elam, but you're denied its rewards. The code's structure reveals a society dependent on even its youngest laborers, balancing control with rare mercies like Law 117's release promise, often unfulfilled. As you toil, you wonder, could you hold onto your childhood's fleeting joys? Or does slavery's grip erase your youth entirely in this prosperous city? In Babylon, 1750 BCE, you, a child slave, labor under the Code of Hammurabi's harsh laws, your small frame tasked with fetching water or cleaning temple floors. Your bondage, whether from debt, war, or birth, steals your childhood, marking you with a clay tag as an outcast. Your labor fuels Babylon's wealth, producing grain and textiles for trade to Mari. Yet you're shunned by free children and barred from rituals like the Akitu festival. The code enforces your servitude, but you resist through small acts of defiance, clinging to your identity. How did slave children navigate this oppressive system, and what did it cost to preserve their sense of self? The code's laws bind you tightly. Law 117 ensnares you with your family for a debt, as a Sipper tablet records a girl, Ishtarbelet, enslaved for her father's loan. Law 175 ensures your enslavement if born to a slave mother, even with a free father, tying your birth to chains. Separation is common. A Larsa tablet describes a child sold to a merchant while his parents toiled elsewhere. Your tasks carrying baskets or grinding grain are grueling for your age, and Law 146's punishments, like reassignment to kill work, loom for mistakes. As a Nipper tablet notes, a boy lashed for spilling oil. Your daily life is exhausting. You survive on sparse rations, barley and fish, per your ledger's hunger gnawing at you. You might sweep a household courtyard, your hands blistered, or carry reeds for temple construction, always under an overseer's eye. Escape is nearly impossible. Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways traps you, as your tablet recounts a child branded for fleeing. Socially, your isolated free children taunt you in markets, and temples exclude you from sacred rites. Yet you resist by whispering tales with other slave children, as Uruk records show, or hiding a date to share. Risking Law 7's theft penalties, community sustains you. You trade a small braid of reeds for a story, as your records note, forging bonds that defy isolation. These acts risk betrayal, as overseers reward informants, but offer a sense of belonging. Your labor supports Babylon's economy, yet you're denied its rewards. Manumission is rare. Law 117's 3-year release is often extended, but stories of freedom, like your child freed for skilled weaving, fuel hope. Your resilience is a quiet rebellion. The Code's reliance on child labor reveals Babylon's dependence on the vulnerable, balanced by rare mercies like Amisadwa's 1646 BCE edict freeing some debt slaves. As you toil, you wonder, can your small, axe-shared stories or hidden rations preserve your childhood, or will slavery's weight crush your spirit? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a child slave, you've grown under the Code of Hammurabi's oppressive weight, your youth stolen by labor carrying reeds or grinding grain. Your bondage, marked by a clay tag, fuels Babylon's wealth, yet you're an outcast, shunned by free children and excluded from rituals like the Akitu. You've resisted through whispered stories and shared rations, defying the Code's dehumanization. The climax of your story lies in whether you can preserve your childhood's spark, or if slavery will define your future. How did child slaves endure, and what legacy did their struggle leave? The Code's laws bind you tightly. Law 117 traps you in debt slavery with your family, often extended as a sipper tablet shows a boy, Shamashili, kept beyond his term. Law 175 ensures your enslavement if born to a slave mother, linking your birth to chains. Separation is frequent. A Larsa tablet describes a child sold to a temple, far from parents. Your tasks sweeping floors or hauling baskets are punishing, and Law 146's penalties, like kill work, loom for errors. As a Nipper tablet notes a girl flogged for breaking a jar. Escape risks death under Law 15, as a Your tablet recounts a child chained for fleeing. You endure through resilience. You share tales of your parents' village while cleaning altars, as Uruk records show, or hide a date to trade for a pebble toy, risking Law 7's theft penalties. These acts preserve your childhood against the Code's erasure. Community is vital. You bond with other slave children, trading a woven band for a story, as your tablets note. Despite betrayal risks, your rations barley and fish are meager, and temples bar you from sacred rites. But these bonds offer hope. Freedom is rare. Manumission, like your child, freed for skilled textile work, is uncommon, and even freed, stigma lingers. A sipper tablet describes a former slave child mocked as a farmer. Your Defiance shared stories or hidden goods challenged Babylon's reliance on young laborers, exposing its fragility. The Code's mercies, like Amisadwa's 1646 BCE edict freeing debt slaves, aimed to prevent unrest, but most remained bound. Your story, etched in clay, influenced later laws, like biblical codes protecting vulnerable children today. Parallels exist in exploited child labor, where resilience defies dehumanization. Babylon's wealth rested on children like you, but your defiance sowed change. The lesson is clear: exploiting the young breeds instability as their spirit endures. How did your struggle reflect Babylon's flaws? And what does it teach us about preserving childhood in oppression? Story 13: The Price of Freedom, Manumission, and its Aftermath in Babylonian. In ancient Babylon, around 1750 BCE, where the Euphrates River glints under the sun and the city pulses with markets and ziggurats. As a slave, you toil under the Code of Hammurabi, grinding barley or weaving textiles, your life marked by a clay tag or shaved head. The dream of manumission freedom, granted by law or master, burns within you, a rare hope in a system built on your labor. Babylon's wealth, from grain to trade with Elam, relies on slaves like you. But freedom comes at a steep price, often leaving scars. What did manumission mean for slaves, and how did its aftermath shape their lives? The Code of Hammurabi offers limited paths to freedom. Law 117 promises debt slaves release after 3 years, but Sipper tablets show creditors extending terms, trapping you longer. A record describes a slave in Anabelet whose debt lingered 5 years. For war captives or those born enslaved, manumission hinges on a master's whim or exceptional service, like a Uruk tablet noting a slave freed for skilled pottery. Royal edicts, such as Amisadwa's in 1646 BCE, occasionally canceled debts to ease unrest, but these are rare. Freedom might also come through adoption, though a Larsa tablet shows such cases often tied to continued service. Your daily life is grueling. You rise before dawn, eating sparse rations, barley and fish, per your ledgers while weaving or digging canals. The Code's Law 146 threatens harsher tasks for defiance, and Law 15 deters escape with death for aid. A Nipper tablet recounts a slave branded for fleeing. Socially, you're an outcast, shunned in markets, and barred from rituals like the Akitu festival. Yet, you cling to hope, sharing whispers of freed slaves with others, as Uruk records note, or honing skills like brewing to earn favor, risking punishment for errors. Manumission's promise is bittersweet. Even if freed, stigma lingers. Your tablet describes a freed slave shunned by neighbors. Your labor fuels Babylon's economy, but freedom often means trading one hardship for another, poverty or social exile. You might barter a mended tool for news of manumission, building fragile bonds with other slaves. The Code's structure, balancing control with rare mercies, reveals a society dependent on slaves, yet wary of unrest. As you toil, you wonder, could manumission truly restore your place in Babylon? Or does its price stigma, debt, or new struggles make freedom as binding as slavery? In Babylon, 1750 BCE, you labor as a slave, your days consumed by hauling reeds or spinning wool under the Code of Hammurabi's rigid laws. Your toil fuels the city's wealth, grain and textiles traded to Mariette. You're an outcast, marked by a clay tag, shunned by free citizens. The dream of manumission keeps you going, but its paths are narrow, and its aftermath is uncertain. The Code offers rare hope, but freedom often brings new burdens, stigma, poverty, or continued dependence. How did slaves pursue manumission, and what challenges did they face in its wake? The code's paths to freedom are limited. Law 117 grants debt slaves release after 3 years, but Sipper tablets show creditors manipulating debts. As a woman, Ishtarumi remained enslaved for 6 years. For those born enslaved or war captives, manumission requires exceptional acts, like a Yor tablet noting a slave freed for saving a master's child. Royal edicts, like Amisadwa's in 1646 BCE, free some debt slaves to prevent unrest, but a Larsa tablet shows temples resisting such releases. Adoption offers another path, though a Nipper record notes a freed slave bound to serve as a son. Your life is exhausting. You survive on meager rations, barley and fish, per your ledgers while weaving or digging canals. Law 146 punishes defiance with grueling tasks like kill work. As a Sipper tablet describes a slave reassigned for slow labor, escape is futile. Law 15's death penalty traps you, as your tablet recounts a slave branded for fleeing. You're excluded from rituals like the Akitu and shunned in markets, but you resist by sharing stories of freedom with other slaves, as Uruk records show, or honing skills like brewing to curry favor. Freedom's aftermath is harsh. Your tablet describes a freed slave, once a weaver, struggling to farm and shunned by neighbors. Some freed slaves, per Larsa records, remain tied to masters through debt or obligation. You build bonds with others, trading a mended tunic for news of manumission, risking betrayal by informants. Your labor powers Babylon's trade to Elam, but freedom often trades chains for poverty. The code's rare mercies, like Law 117, reveal a system balancing exploitation with stability to avoid rebellion. Your pursuit of manumission is a fragile hope. You weigh every act, perfecting a craft or sharing whispers against the risk of punishment. As you toil, you wonder, can manumission truly grant you a place in Babylon's society? Or will its price social exile or new debts bind you in a different way? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a slave, you've toiled under the Code of Hammurabi, weaving textiles or digging canals. Your labor fueling trade to Elam, the dream of manumission freedom from your clay tags, Shama has driven you. But its rarity and cost weigh heavily. You've resisted through small acts, like honing skills or sharing stories, risking Law 146's punishments. The climax of your story lies in whether freedom can restore your place in society, or if its price stigma, poverty, or new bonds replaces one chain with another. How did manumission's aftermath shape slaves' lives, and what legacy did it leave? The code offers slim paths to freedom. Law 117's 3-year release for debt slaves is often extended, as a Sipper tablet shows a man Shamashili kept for 7 years. Manumission for others requires extraordinary acts, like a Yor record of a slave freed for crafting a temple statue. Royal edicts, like Amisadwa's in 1646 BCE, free some to curb unrest, but a Larsa tablet notes temples resisting. Adoption, per a Nipper record, often binds freed slaves to ongoing service. Freedom's price is high. Your tablet describes a freed slave, shunned, unable to farm profitably. Your resilience sustains you. You share tales of freedom while hauling bricks, as Uruk records show, or hide a fish to trade, risking law 7's theft penalties. These acts defy the code's isolation, though Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways traps you, as your tablet recounts a branded escape. Your rations, barley, and dates are meek, and you're barred from rituals like the Akitu community. Like trading a woven band for hope, offers solace despite betrayal risks. If freed, you face exclusion. A Sipper tablet describes a freed slave, once a brewer, mocked and impoverished. Your labor built Babylon's wealth, but the code's reliance on slavery, tempered by rare mercies, reveals a fragile system. Edicts show a society wary of rebellion, influencing later Assyrian and biblical laws with similar balances. Your story, etched in clay, proves resilience outlasts chains, but freedom's cost lingers today. Parallels exist in systems where freedom from exploitation brings new struggles, stigma, or economic hardship. Babylon's dependence on slaves like you exposed its flaws, as manumissions limits sowed unrest. The lesson is clear. True freedom requires acceptance, not just release. How did manumission's aftermath reflect Babylon's values? And what does it teach us about the cost of liberty? Story 14, The Overseer's Whip, Power and Punishment in Babylonian Slaviarur in Ancient Babylon, around 1750 BCE, where the Euphrates River shines and the city thrives with vibrant markets and towering ziggurats. As a slave, you labor under the Code of Hammurabi, grinding barley or digging canals, your life ruled by the overseer's whip. This figure, tasked with enforcing discipline, wields power that shapes your every move, ensuring your toil fuels Babylon's wealth grain and textiles traded to Elam, marked by a clay tag or shaved head. You're an outcast, your existence defined by fear of punishment. What was the role of the overseer in Babylonian slavery, and how did their power shape your life? The Code of Hammurabi empowers overseers to maintain control. Law 146 allows them to reassign disobedient slaves to harsher tasks, like kill work, while Law 15 threatens death for aiding runaways, trapping you in servitude. A Sipper tablet records a slave, Enlil-Benai, branded for fleeing, the overseer's whip enforcing compliance. Your tasks, whether weaving in a household or hauling reeds for temples, are vital to Babylon's economy, but errors invite punishment. A Nipper tablet describes a slave flogged for spilling a sacred offering, the overseer acting as judge and enforcer. Your daily life is relentless. You rise before dawn, eating meager rations, barley, porridge, and fish, per your ledgers barely sustaining you. You might sweep temple courtyards or carry grain to warehouses, always under the overseer's gaze. Socially, you're shunned. Free citizens avoid you in markets, and you're barred from rituals like the Akitu festival. Overseers, often slaves themselves, elevated to authority, exploit their power, as a Larsa tablet notes one demanding bribes for lighter tasks. The Code's Law 199 offers fines for severe injury, but overseers rarely face scrutiny. You resist quietly, sharing whispers with other slaves while working, as Uruk records show, or slowing your pace, risking the whip. These acts defy the overseer's control, though a nipper tablet recounts a slave punished for hiding grain. Your labor supports Babylon's trade, but the overseer's whip ensures your submission. The code's structure, balancing punishment with rare mercies like Law 117's debt slave release, reveals a system reliant on fear to maintain order. As you toil under the overseer's shadow, you wonder, could you evade the whip's sting through cunning or compliance? Or does its power define your existence in this prosperous city? In Babylon, 1750 BCE, you labor as a slave under the Code of Hammurabi, weaving textiles or hauling bricks, your life dictated by the overseer's whip. This enforcer of discipline ensures your toil powers Babylon's wealth, grain and cloth traded to Mari, while you remain an outcast, marked by a clay tag. The overseer's power, backed by the code's harsh laws, shapes your every move, punishing defiance and enforcing submission. Yet you resist in subtle ways, seeking to preserve your humanity. How did the overseer's authority shape slave life? And what did it cost to defy their control? The code empowers overseers with brutal authority. Law 146 allows reassignment to grueling tasks, like canal digging for disobedience, while Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways traps you. A Sipper tablet describes a slave, Ishtarumi, lashed for slow weaving. The overseer's whip swift. Overseers, sometimes former slaves, wield unchecked power. A Larsa tablet notes one extorting rations for leniency. Your tasks grinding grain or cleaning altars are essential, but errors invite punishment. A Nipper tablet recounts a slave reassigned to kilns for dropping a lamp, per Law 146. Your daily life is exhausting. You survive on sparse rations, barley and fish, per your ledgers, while working under the overseer's watchful eye. You might carry reeds for temple construction, your back aching, or spin wool in a household, always fearing a misstep. Socially, you're invisible. Free citizens shun you in markets, and temples bar you from rituals like the Akitu. You resist quiet-less-lowing work or hiding a date to share. As Uruk records, show-risking Law 7's theft penalties. Your tablet describes a slave flogged for hoarding grain. The overseer's whip unrelenting. Community offers solace. You whisper defiance with other slaves, trading a mended tool for a story, as your records note. Though informants pose risks, your labor fuels Babylon's trade to Elam. But the overseer ensures your compliance, exploiting the code's lack of oversight. Law 199's injury fines are rarely enforced, leaving you vulnerable. The hope of manumission, like Law 117's debt slave release, is faint, often thwarted by creditors. As Sipper tablets show, the overseer's whip is both symbol and tool of control, reflecting Babylon's reliance on fear to sustain its economy. Your subtle, defiant shared whispers or slowed tasks challenges their power, but at great risk. As you toil, you wonder, can you outwit the overseer's whip to reclaim a shred of freedom? Or will it sting forever, bind you to Babylon's system? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a slave, you've toiled under the Code of Hammurabi, weaving cloth or digging canals, your life ruled by the overseer's whip. Your labor fuels the city's trade to Elam, but the overseers, power-backed by laws like Law 146, ensures your submission. punishing defiance with lashings or harsher tasks. You've resisted quietly through slowed work or shared stories, seeking to preserve your humanity. The climax of your story lies in whether you can evade the overseer's control or if their whip will define your fate. How did the overseer's punishment shape slave lives, and what legacy did it leave? The code grants overseers near absolute power. Law 146 reassigns defiant slaves to brutal tasks, like kill work. As a sipper, tablet notes a slave burned for slow labor. Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways traps you. As your tablet recounts a slave, Shamashili, chained for fleeing. Overseers, sometimes former slaves, exploit their role. A Larsa tablet describes one taking bribes for lighter work. Punishments are Swift and Nipper tablet records a slave flogged for hiding a fish per Law 7. The Code's Law 199 offers injury fines, but overseers face little accountability. You endure through resilience. You share tales of defiance while hauling bricks, as Uruk records show, or slow your weaving, risking the whip. Your rations barley and dates are meager, and you're barred from rituals like the Akitu, but community sustains you. You trade a woven band for hope, as your tablets note, despite betrayal risks. Your labor powers Babylon's economy, but the overseer's whip enforces your isolation. Manumission, like Law 117's debt slave release, is rare, often extended, as sipper tablets show. Though your slave was freed for skilled brewing, if freed, stigma persists. A sipper tablet describes a freed slave, shunned, struggling to farm. The overseer's whip, symbolizing control, reveals Babylon's reliance on fear, balanced by rare mercies like Amisadwa's 1646 BCE edict to prevent unrest. Your Defiance shared stories, or hidden goods, exposed the system's fragility, influencing later Assyrian and biblical laws emphasizing discipline. Your story, etched in clay, shows resilience outlasting punishment. Today, parallels exist in systems using fear to control labor. Babylon's wealth rested on your suffering, but your defiance sowed change. The lesson is clear. Power through punishment breeds instability as human spirit endures. How did the overseer's whip reflect Babylon's flaws? And what does it teach us about control and resilience? Story 15, The Sacred and the Enslaved. Slavery in Babylonian Temple Siar in ancient Babylon, around 1750 BCE, where the Euphrates River gleams and the city thrives with bustling markets and towering ziggurats. As a slave in a temple, you serve the gods under the Code of Hammurabi, cleaning altars, weaving ritual garments, or hauling offerings. Temples, central to Babylon's spiritual and economic life, rely on your labor to sustain their wealth and influence. From grain stores to trade with Elam, marked by a clay tag or shaved head, you're an outcast, barred from sacred rites, yet essential to their execution. What was the role of slaves in Babylonian temples, and how did this shape your existence? The Code of Hammurabi governs your life with precision. Law 146 allows temple overseers to reassign disobedient slaves to harsher tasks, like grinding sesame, while Law 15 threatens death for aiding runaways, trapping you. A sipper tablet records a slave, Enlilbani, branded for attempting escape from temple duties. Temples, major slaveholders, use you to maintain their vast estates. As Larsa tablets show slaves harvesting barley for offerings, your work supports the temple's economic power. But you're excluded from rituals like the Akitu festival, reserved for free priests and citizens. Your daily life is grueling. You rise before dawn, eating meager rations, barley, porridge, and fish. Purr your ledgers while sweeping temple courtyards or spinning wool for sacred cloths. A Nippur tablet describes a slave flogged for spilling an offering, the overseer's whip enforcing discipline. Socially, you're invisible. Free worshippers shun you, and your status is clear from your tattered tunic. Yet you find resilience, whispering stories with other slaves while working, as Uruk records note, or hiding a date to share. Risking Law 7's theft penalties, your labor fuels the temple's role as a hub of wealth and divine favor, producing goods traded to Mari, the Code's rare mercies. Like Law 117's 3-year release for debt slaves, are often ignored by temples as Sippar tablets show extended terms. Your service to the gods, meant to be sacred, feels profane as you're denied spiritual connection. The temple's reliance on slaves reveals Babylon's fusion of faith and exploitation, with your toil upholding both as you labor in the ziggurat's shadow. You wonder, could you find meaning in serving the gods? Or does your enslavement in this sacred space strip away your humanity entirely? In Babylon, 1750 BCE, you toil as a temple slave under the Code of Hammurabi. Your days spent cleaning altars or harvesting grain for offerings. Your labor sustains the temple's wealth, from barley stores to trade with Mari. Yet you're an outcast, marked by a clay tag, barred from sacred rites like the Akitu festival. The overseer's whip enforces your servitude, while the Code's laws ensure your subjugation. Despite this, you resist quietly through shared stories or hidden acts seeking to preserve your humanity. How did temple slaves navigate their role, and what did it cost to maintain their identity in this sacred yet oppressive space? The Code empowers temple overseers to control you. Law 146 permits reassignment to grueling tasks like grinding sesame for Defiance, while Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways traps you. A Sippar tablet describes a slave, Ishtarumi, lashed for mishandling a sacred vessel. Temples rely on your labor for their estates. Larsa tablets note slaves producing textiles for trade. Your tasks sweeping courtyards or weaving ritual cloths are essential, but exclude you from the divine. As a Nippur tablet recounts a slave punished for lingering near a shrine, your life is exhausting. You survive on sparse rations, barley and fish, per your ledgers, while hauling reeds or preparing offerings under the overseer's gaze. Socially, you're shunned. Free worshippers ignore you, and your tattered tunic signals your status. You resist subtly, whispering tales of your past while spinning wool, as Uruk records show, or hiding a date to share. Risking Law 7's theft penalties. Your tablet notes a slave flogged for hoarding grain, the overseer's whip swift. These acts assert your identity. Though punishment looms, community sustains you. You trade a mended cloth for a story with other slaves, as your records note, defying the Code's isolation despite betrayal risks. Your labor supports the temple's trade to Elam, yet you're denied spiritual rewards. Manumission is rare. Law 117's debt slave release is often extended by temples. As Sipper tablets show, though your slave was freed for skilled weaving, the temple's sacred role masks its exploitation. With your toil bridging the divine and the profane, your resilience challenges the temple's control. The code's reliance on slave labor, tempered by rare mercies, like Amos Adwa's 1646 BCE edict, reveals a system balancing faith and oppression. As you toil, you wonder, can your quiet, defiant shared whispers or hidden acts preserve your humanity? Or will the temple's sacred chains bind you forever? Years have passed in Babylon, 1750 BCE, and as a temple slave, you've toiled under the Code of Hammurabi, weaving sacred cloths or harvesting grain, your labor sustaining the temple's wealth and trade to Elam. The overseer's whip and laws like Law 146 enforce your servitude, while your clay tag marks you as an outcast, barred from rituals like the Akitu. You've resisted through whispered stories and hidden acts, preserving your humanity in this sacred yet oppressive space. The climax of your story lies in whether you can maintain your identity or if the temple's chains will define you. How did slavery in temples shape lives, and what legacy did it leave? The code ensures your subjugation. Law 146 reassigns defiant slaves to brutal tasks, like grinding sesame, as a Sipper tablet notes a slave punished for slow weaving. Law 15's death penalty for aiding runaways traps you, as your tablet recounts a slave. Shamashili, branded for fleeing temple duties. Temples, major economic hubs, rely on your labor. Larsa tablets show slaves producing barley for offerings. You're essential, yet excluded, as a Nipper tablet describes a slave flogged for touching a sacred statue. Barred from divine connection, you endure through resilience. You share tales of your past while cleaning altars, as Uruk records show, or hide a fish to trade, risking Law 7's penalties. Community sustains you. You bond with other slaves, trading a woven band for hope. As your tablets note, despite betrayal risks, your rations barley and dates are meager, and you're shunned by free worshippers. Manumission is rare. Law 117's debt slave release is often ignored by temples. As Sipper tablets show, though your slave was freed for exceptional textile work, if freed, stigma lingers. A Sipper tablet describes a freed slave, shunned, struggling to farm. Your Defiance shared stories or hidden goods challenged the temple's control, exposing its reliance on exploitation. The code's mercies, like Amasadwa's 1646 BCE edict, reveal a system balancing faith and oppression, influencing later Assyrian and biblical temple labor laws. Your story, etched in clay, shows resilience, outlasting sacred chains. Today, parallels exist in institutions exploiting labor under moral pretexts. Babylon's temples thrived on your toil, but your defiance sowed change. The lesson is clear. Blending faith and exploitation breeds fragility as human spirit endures. How did your role in the sacred reflect Babylon's flaws, and what does it teach us about labor and belief?